Lily froze in place when she heard the emperor's voice, which said that she seemed to imagine herself as an empress. The Marquis was taken aback and declared that news had reached him that his foolish daughter had treated them unfairly, and he wished to offer his deepest apologies. Yusinil looked at them intently, but said nothing. At that very moment, the emperor declared that this would not do, since the lady did not consider it necessary to greet those to whom she needed to apologize. He said that she seemed to be ignorant of etiquette, and he wanted to teach her a couple of lessons, at which point his knight drew his sword from its sheath. The emperor looked at the Marquis and asked what he would say. The Marquis, in turn, trembled with fear. At that very moment, he bowed his daughter and told her to immediately beg for forgiveness. She was in shock and did not understand why her father treated her like that. He shouted that he didn't want to hear anything and she should apologize. The young lady approached her sister, as she didn't like the situation. Yusinil looked closely at her sister, who was scared. The young lady called her sister, but at that very moment, Yusinil, with a smile, told her sister that she didn't need to worry, as she would sort everything out. She quickly walked up to the emperor and asked him to stop. Looking at the young lady, she stated that she did not need an apology. She said that this was her precious sister's first social evening, and she didn't want to spoil the impression. Yusinil looked at the young lady coldly and menacingly, as she hoped that she had already realized her mistake. She said that the young ice girl should no longer call herself the future empress, without having good reasons for doing so. The emperor looked at the young lady with a smile, and remarked that he completely agreed with her. But he stated that if something like this happened, they would not escape punishment. Meanwhile, the young man stood quietly to the side, but he heard all the whispers of the aristocrats who were discussing this topic. They said that young Yusinil seemed to have become the emperor's favorite. At that very moment, the young man turned his gaze to the young lady. He was curious about who she was, as he had heard many whispers about her, but today, he saw her. After some time, the young lady was walking slowly through the garden, as she found it difficult due to the huge crowd around the emperor. Yusinil was puzzled, as she had hardly managed to slip away from there unnoticed. Some time ago, she quietly told the emperor that she wanted a drink. He quickly replied that he would immediately bring her some water. A moment later, the young league was taken aback, as she noticed the man, but at the same time, she was worried that she could be alone in this place. She knew that noble gentlemen rarely attended social events dressed like this. She wondered if he was also disgusted by the whole masquerade. Meanwhile, the young man was puzzled, wondering when the masquerade would end. She sighed because she understood him. But at that very moment, the wind blew, and she saw his face sideways. The young lady was taken aback for a moment, but at that very moment she recognized the young man. And without wasting a minute, the young lady ran up to the stranger and asked if it was Dr. Worthing in front of her. Shine. He looked at her in surprise and asked if she really knew who he really was. Yusinil was shocked and could not believe that the doctor himself was standing in front of her. She was lucky to meet a scientist who became famous throughout the empire, because before his research, people did not perceive magic as a science at all. He was able to prove that there are many dimensions in the universe that are connected by an invisible, magical thread. He also convinced everyone that creatures like dragons and fairies were quite real, only they lived in other worlds. To her, he was a great man, but he rarely appeared in public, so she decided to ask him a few questions about his work. After some time, the young people were talking enthusiastically about science and magic. The young man looked at her intently as he saw a like-minded person, and she stated that she had read all of his works. They discussed these materials heatedly for some time. At that very moment, the maid passed by them and noticed that all the aristocrats were strange. Meanwhile, the young lady was hastily writing down everything she heard from him, and at the same time, she said that he was simply a genius. He looked at her with a smile and said that he had heard that the next leading figure in science was destined to write an article. He noticed that her hard work, perseverance, and unconventional approach were truly amazing. She was taken aback when he learned her name, which she did not say. A moment later, the young lady introduced herself and stated that she was in charge of a research project. He greeted her back with a smile. At the same time, he asked how she recognized him, since he was not one of those people who showed themselves in public, and few people knew about him. The young lady stated that there was a photograph of him under one article, and after some time, the young lady learned that he had come to the estate to be sad. He looked at her with a smile and asked her not to tell anyone about their meeting, while the lady assured him that he did not need to worry. Worthing glanced sideways into the distance, and noticed that everyone was already looking for the young lady. At that moment, he said goodbye to her. But the young lady stopped him and asked if he would like to meet at a city cafe the following weekend. He was surprised by this, but she assured him that they could reserve a separate room and continue their discussion in a private setting. Yusunil said that she still had a lot of questions that she wanted to ask him. At that very moment, the young man said with a smile that he would gladly accept her proposal. The young lady was incredibly happy about this. Meanwhile, the emperor quietly watched them from afar. He saw how his beloved was happily talking with some young man. At the same time, he did not like this scene, since his beloved was giving her unique smile to another man. Sometime later, the reception ended, and the young people returned back. Yusunil was a little puzzled, as she saw that her companion was not in the mood. She knew something was wrong because he hadn't said a word during their trip. Her sister fell asleep and was taken away in another carriage, so the young people were left alone. She thought that he would stick to her like a bath leaf, but for some reason he sat down, on the contrary, further away from her. She understood that this was not like him at all. Yusunil, looking at her companion, timidly asked if he was angry with her. He looked at her intently, but at the same moment said that she should not say such nonsense. She was taken aback because she did not understand why he said such a thing. At the same moment, he asked how he could be angry with her. The emperor said that she was his greatest treasure, the one and only. He said with a smile that she, knowing this better than others, still said such cruel things. The young lady looked intently at her companion, for she recognized his look, and it made her freeze. And then she felt a burning cold and an indefinable desire, as if she were drowning in the pool of his eyes without offering even a bit of resistance. He said he was afraid she would start liking her light hair more than her dark hair, and that someday she would give her dazzling smile to someone else. He said he was afraid because she could leave him at any moment, and he didn't know when it would happen. She didn't understand how he could love her so much. She did not understand how he could belong to only her in sociology. He said that she was his whole world, and at the same time, he showed her all his passion. The young lady wanted him to calm down a little, but he, in turn, kissed her back with even greater passion. She sighed heavily and asked him to give her some rest. He asked in surprise why she broke the kiss. He wanted her not to push him away, and for this reason, he begged her. Yusunil sighed heavily, as she realized that her companion was simply a fool. She pulled him closer to her and declared that he had gotten it all wrong again, and she pulled away not because she didn't like him, but simply because she couldn't breathe. He looked at her with tears in his eyes in a way he had not expected. Yusunil stated that he kissed her so fiercely that she had difficulty even breathing. He stated with bewilderment that she could just breathe through her nose. The young lady was shocked. She said that she tried. Looking away from him, she stated that this was her second kiss, and she did not understand how to do everything correctly. At that very moment, he declared with a grin that she couldn't do everything. She said that she had never kissed anyone before him, and there was nothing surprising about that. Tesfalun, with tears in his eyes but with a joyful smile, declared that he was very happy. He said that he could not understand whether she was crying or laughing, but he was glad that only he knew her from such sides, because she always gave the impression of an ideal and collected young lady. Tesfalun looked intently at his companion and asked her to be just as meek and gentle with him. She pulled away from him and asked him sheepishly if he could just wipe his tears and stop being childish. He said that she, on the contrary, behaved strictly like a ruler. He did not understand why this was happening, but he thought that love was to blame for everything. The young lady thought about his words for a moment. She saw him first cling to her and throw a tantrum, and then smile as if nothing had happened. She had no idea whether it was love or not, but at that moment all her thoughts evaporated as the emperor called her. She looked at him intently. As she thought his lips were sweet, without wasting a minute, she kissed him tenderly. Sometime later she sat quietly, lost in her thoughts, as the emperor declared that he was afraid of losing her because he loved her. She was afraid to reciprocate his feelings. She knew whether she loved him or not. Moments later, the young lady was taken aback as she heard her friend calling her. Oren looked at her intently and stated that she had come to her to share important news, but her friend was in the clouds. The young lady was taken aback and said with a smile that she was listening to her attentively, but at the same moment, she asked her friend about something she had talked about earlier. A moment later, she greeted her friend with a smile as the head of the family, and she did not forget to congratulate her on the joyful event. Orin told her friend that she had some credit for this, because she had previously said that her sister did not need to apologize, and her father was seriously scared. She sighed and stated that he most likely thought that this time his daughter would definitely lose her head. He spoke with the emperor and decided to resign. She said that he gave her a choice, either to lead the family or to give up all privileges. She looked closely at her friend as she saw that she did not look happy after all the news. Oren thought for a moment, not knowing what to answer. The young lady asked her friend if something was bothering her. At that moment, she sighed heavily and declared that it was all because of Lord Ethel. She told her friend that she probably noticed that she was not indifferent to him, but she understood that they would hardly be able to be together, since she had inherited the title, and he could inherit his from his father. She sighed and stated that her future husband would have to become a member of her family and renounce his own surname, so the young duke would not agree to this. Yusinil told her friend that she could give up her title in favor of her fiancé, but the young lady stated that she would simply find another groom. She didn't want to sacrifice everything for her lover, and on top of everything else, she didn't believe in love until her last breath. Yusinil was taken aback as she didn't expect to hear something like that. Oren sighed and asked her friend if she knew why her father loved her sister so much. She revealed that her sister was the daughter of his mistress, not the woman he was married to. She said her father tried to keep it a secret, but word spread quickly. She knew that her friend was doing well in her family, and for this reason, it was extremely difficult for her to believe in the existence of true love. Oren sighed as she told her friend that it might be hard for her to understand, but the young lady knew that it wasn't so at all. She understood perfectly well what her friend felt, because she was running away from love for the same reason. At that moment, she sighed heavily, as she realized that she truly loved the emperor. But it was extremely difficult for her to open her heart to him. Meanwhile, the young lady was sleeping quietly in her room, but she was having a terrible nightmare. She burst into bitter tears and writhed in pain, as she was in unbearable pain. At that very moment, the emperor hurried to her and called her. He asked in surprise what had happened, and she, no less surprised, called him. He gave in, surprised. Had she really had a nightmare? Yusinil asked in surprise what he was doing in her room. He said with a smile that he had always been there for her. She sighed because she knew it was true. He hugged her quietly for a while. A moment later, the young lady asked if he really loved her. Without hesitation, he replied that of course he loved her, and had always loved her with all his heart. She asked if he would always be by her side. But, unfortunately, there was no answer to her question. At that very moment, he said that it was impossible. She was surprised, but at the same time, he asked if she didn't understand. He said with a grin that in the end, she would leave him herself. He looked at her intently and declared that she was obsessed with her research and did not care about his feelings. He says that she only thinks about how to return to her world, without really knowing if it is possible. Looking away, she said that she is very worried about her mother, but at that very moment she saw his appearance, which insisted that she was only afraid of being deceived, and therefore she wanted to leave as soon as the gates between the worlds opened. They told her with a fierce grin that she was nothing but a coward. The young lady was taken aback by what she heard. She knew it was not so. She screamed that it was not true, but after some time, the young lady still woke up from her terrible nightmare, but with tears in her eyes. She sighed when she realized it was just a bad dream, and she was puzzled because she had been having nightmares for a long time. She didn't know what to do because it was difficult for her to keep everything to herself. Meanwhile, the young man sat quietly in the office, waiting for the guest. After some time, he heard some kind of drain door, and at that very moment, his expression changed, and he greeted the young lady with joy, as he had been waiting for her for a long time. She apologized for being late. At that very moment, she declared that she had to take a roundabout route, and that was the reason she was delayed. A moment later, the young lady asked him how long he had been waiting for her. He smiled and stated that he was not bothered by the wait, so she did not need to worry. Yusinil thanked him, but noticed that he was too kind. He said with a smile that he was not trying to be polite at all, but he said that, after an interesting conversation, he was eager to see her again, because he couldn't even remember the last time he spoke to someone with such pleasure. She was surprised to hear something like that, but at the same time, she noticed that today he had combed his hair and was dressed to the nines. Yusinil looked at the doctor and asked if she could begin. At that very moment, he gave her the floor with a smile. After some time of their discussion, he looked at her in surprise and asked what she meant by that. Yusinil sighed and looked closely at the young man, as her formulas were incorrect. Worthing, looking at his companion, said that last time he had not dared to ask her a question. But now he asked why she was so interested in this research. She looked at him in surprise, as she did not understand the question. He stated that he was doing research to publish new articles, as this was his job and a way of self-realization. He said with a smile that it also brought him inexplicable joy. He thought they were similar in that way. But, according to his observations, she did not receive any particular satisfaction. On the contrary, she was in a hurry, as if someone was rushing her. Yusinil stated that she was much more attracted to the possibility of traveling between worlds using magic. She said that this was the reason she was studying mana surges, as it was believed that they often opened portals to other dimensions. But it was difficult for her to predict when and where the next magical storm would occur. So she was losing her patience. She felt as if she was losing her way and didn't know what to grab onto. Worthing said he heard about travel while he was working on one of his early works. He said that many of his colleagues were convinced that mana surges were caused by demons. But in fact, their appearance should be considered more of a consequence than a cause, since they were attracted by the activity of other magical creatures. She wondered if they could catch a magical storm if they found the demons. Worthing believed that was correct. However, evidence about their habitats is strictly classified. At that very moment, she handed him copies of the documents found in the palace library. Yusinil asked if traveling between worlds was possible. He stated that it was theoretically possible, but unfortunately, no one had yet been able to prove this. She understood that it was impossible to say for sure. She understood that although she had no guarantees, she had learned a lot from her conversation with the doctor, because he had helped her get closer to her goal. But at that very moment, she remembered the emperor, and that he had tenderly spoken of his love for her. But now, she was not thinking about his love at all. She sighed heavily and stated that she also hoped that it would be possible to travel across the world. Deciding to escape responsibility, her father abandoned her. But he abandoned not only his daughter, he abandoned his wife, who was sick. Unfortunately, the young lady was caught between fires, putting her own life on hold. She saw her classmates whispering and introducing the wonderful life of teenagers. But unfortunately, the young lady knew that such luxury was unaffordable for her, and therefore the frivolity of those around her very quickly began to irritate her. She understood that no one but her could take care of her poor mother, so she wanted to return to her world, and her relationship with Tess had to end. She understood perfectly well that she had to do something like this for the common good. At least, that would have been the right thing to do. But it was difficult for her. Meanwhile, Genielle enjoyed the gifts with a joyful smile. She told the emperor that she had never seen such bright toys, but at the same time, she wondered if all of this was really for her. Meanwhile, Yusinil looked at the young people with puzzlement, because they were going home. She did not know how they ended up in the palace. The emperor looked at the girl with a smile and declared that she could take as many toys as she wanted, because she was the sister of his precious Yusinil. He looked at his beloved with embarrassment. Yusinil turned her gaze away from him with lightning speed. The emperor looked at his beloved with surprise and excitement, as he did not understand her sudden change. He stared at her for a while, not knowing why she had started acting cold again. Genielle looked at her sister with embarrassment and quoted the emperor, who spoke of her as his precious one. Yusinil looked at her sister and asked why she decided to visit the imperial palace. The young lady smiled and stated that the emperor had given her many toys. But before that, he sent her an invitation and said that a gift was waiting for her. Yusinil was surprised, as she knew that the sister should have warned her. She said that in that case, she would not have found herself in an awkward situation. The emperor shuddered after her words. Some time ago, they were riding in a carriage, and the young lady was showing her sister an invitation, but Yusinil Latala was in her thoughts. Unfortunately, she ignored it all and found herself in an awkward position. Genielle told her sister that she had been acting weird lately, and she wasn't listening to her at all. The emperor watched them closely, and the young lady told her sister that after the celebration, she hardly slept and was constantly flying in the clouds. At that very moment, the emperor asked Yusinil to take a walk with him. Looking away, the young lady apologized, but stated that she had to look after her sister. He sighed and said that the maids could handle this matter. At that very moment, he said that he thought she wanted to tell him something. Yusinil looked away from him and said that it was not so. Sometime later, the young lady was walking with the emperor in the garden, but at the same time she was immersed in her thoughts and did not know why she had agreed to go for a walk at all. She was puzzled because she knew she had to put an end to their relationship, but she couldn't utter a word. At that very moment, Tesfalin called his companion, but she did not answer him. But she knew that he would not like all this. She expected him to cling to her with a death grip after the terrible words. She turned around, not knowing what to do. Tesfalin asked his companion what she was thinking so deeply about. Yusinil wondered if she had the courage to push him away. He said with a smile that she shouldn't make him worry. She knew she had found the thread that would help her get home, and so she pushed him away and asked what he was doing. The emperor was taken aback, as he had not expected such a thing. But at that very moment, she turned around and declared that she was going to draw a line between them. He asked her in surprise why she would do something like that, and at the same time he asked if it was all because of the gifts he had sent her sister. He said that it was her fault and asked for forgiveness. But the young lady did not know what to answer him. She did not know if he would believe her, who she was, and where she was from. She didn't know if he would believe it. She was very worried about her lonely mother. She was afraid that he wouldn't survive the fact that they were facing an inevitable separation. But at that very moment, Yusinil could not bear it any longer and, bursting into bitter tears, wondered what if she never returned to her native dimension. Sometimes it seemed to her that the nightmares tormented her because of an oppressive feeling of guilt towards her mother, for the fact that she was quite happy in the new world without her. Yusinil understood that the emperor would not understand her anyway, and at the same time, she knew that no one in this world would understand her. She knew that all she could do was stick to her original plan. But at that very moment, the emperor asked her not to leave. Yusinil knew that she couldn't stop halfway because she didn't know what would happen next. For this reason, she didn't want to take any risks. At that very moment, the emperor asked if she had stopped liking him. She sighed and declared that it was so. At that very moment, the emperor said that he loved her. Yusinil was puzzled and mentally asked him not to complicate things. She was scared and anxious at the very thought of the future. But she immediately forgot about it when she heard his voice. She knew that she was afraid of love, but next to him, she could overcome her fear. Meanwhile, the young scientist found one clue. He was surprised and pleased, because thanks to the lady's calculations, he was able to figure out that the next magical storm would happen on the mountain very soon. He understood that this news would certainly make her happy, but in the meantime, the young lady, unable to withstand the pressure of tenderness, kissed her lover. After a passionate kiss, the young man pulled away from his beloved and tremblingly called out to her. She stared at him for a moment, tears streaming down her face. After a moment, he couldn't stand it anymore and hugged her tighter. After that day, much changed. She took part in a meeting of noble families, and the entire aristocracy learned about her closeness with the emperor. As a result, the arrogant noble offspring stopped picking on her sister. Recently, her sister found friends at the academy and successfully integrated into the student body. She happily left her friends and ran to her sister. She was glad to see her sister after a day of separation. Yusinil asked her sister with a smile why she came so often. Her sister said with a smile that she simply loved her. Meanwhile, her friend received an official title from the emperor. He looked at her intently and said that he very much hoped that she would be wiser than her predecessors. Bowing, the young lady told the emperor that he need not doubt it. Everyone was happy that she officially received the title of head of the family, and at the same time, everyone welcomed her. Yusinil looked at her friend with a smile, as she was, to say the least, happy for her. But at that very moment, the young emperor noticed his beloved in the crowd. Their relationship had changed the most, and she was glad about it. But the young lady did not want to show her emotion in public, so she turned her gaze away from him. The emperor froze in shock when he saw something like this. After some time, he told his beloved that she had suddenly turned away from him, and that it was cruel of her. Tesfalin puffed out his cheeks and said that it was offensive. She sighed and said that a lot of people were looking at them. She asked what he would do when people noticed him making eyes at her. Tesfalin sighed and said that he would just tell everyone that they were dating. She was shocked and screamed that it was impossible to say so directly. He smiled and said that she didn't need to worry because he wouldn't tell her anything, as he knew she didn't like being the center of attention. The emperor said that he would not do what she did not like. At that very moment, the emperor knelt before her and, tenderly taking her hand in his, declared that he was very happy. He said that he was happy because he could be with her. And at the same time, it was difficult for him to believe this. At that very moment, the young lady declared that she was also happy. He was taken aback, as he had not expected to hear such a thing. Tesfalin looked closely at his beloved, as she was embarrassed. He wanted to know if she was serious when she said these words. She asked sheepishly if he really thought she would lie to him. He said with a smile that he hadn't thought anything like that at all. Tesfalun, with a satisfied smile and embarrassment, stated that he was very glad to hear such a thing. At that very moment, he asked if he could kiss her, and she reciprocated. It just so happened that kisses not only helped to correctly express one's feelings, but also gave incomparable bliss. After some time, the young lady returned to her home. Entering the carriage, she asked her sister how long she had been waiting for her, as she had been kept in the library for a while. At that very moment, the young lady shouted to the coachman that he could go. A moment later, she asked her sister why she only had one toy in her hand, since she had previously taken several. Ganyel said with a smile that she had met a fairy in the garden and given her her toy. The young lady was surprised, but her sister stated that she saw a blue-eyed fairy. Yusinil wondered who it really was. She thought it might be a new maid or a friend, so she wanted to meet the emperor and ask if he knew anything about it. After some time, they returned to the estate. The maid reached for the young lady's books, but at that moment, she shuddered. Yusinil declared that her books were from the forbidden section and should not be touched, as they were enchanted. The madam looked menacingly at her daughter and asked if she had really been in the palace. The young lady said with a smile that it was so, and she came in for a short while, as she needed some books. Yusinil, to her regret, knew that her mother did not really like the emperor, and yet her mother did not particularly encourage her close communication with the emperor. At that moment, Madame looked intently at her daughter and said that they needed to talk. The young lady was a little puzzled, but still agreed to talk to her mother. She did not know why her mother treated her lover this way. After some time, the young lady came to her mother's office. Madame turned and looked intently at her daughter, but at the same moment, she handed her a small envelope. She stated that she had collected information on all worthy young men from noble families, and they were free. Yusinil was shocked and did not understand why she needed this information. The madam looked menacingly at her daughter and declared that Anna was a marriageable girl. She said that she knew perfectly well that her studies were her first priority, but it was time for her to think about marriage. Yusinil was taken aback and immediately thanked her mother, but she noted that she was currently busy with her scientific work and did not have time for such things. Madame asked if this was true, and whether that was why she visited the imperial palace so often. The Duchess said that, as far as she remembered, the consilium contained everything necessary for research. The lady asked her mother if she was worried that she might run into the emperor. Madame sighed and stated that she was. Yusinil smiled and told her mother that she didn't need to worry, and that no matter what happened, she could handle everything, because she was smart and strong. She said she had simply gone to the palace library to get some books that weren't in her research center. She asked her mother if she could just believe her. Madame did not answer her question, but a moment later, the madam said that her daughter was free to do whatever she wanted. The lady, with a smile, thanked her mother for her understanding. At that very moment, she smiled and wished her mother good night and left. Madame understood that if it weren't for the shackles, she would have told her daughter the whole truth. But unfortunately, she was held back by terrible shackles. Meanwhile, the young lady, taking a bath deeper and deeper, was immersed in her thoughts. She didn't like the fact that her mother didn't like the emperor, although when they were little, she treated him with warmth. But now, she avoided him, as if he had become a completely different person. At the same time, she wondered what the reason was for the tray. She reminded him of his childhood, so in her eyes, he remained the same as he had been many years ago. Yusinil understood that it was for the best that her mother did not know about their feelings for each other. But in turn, she was puzzled and did not know what to do with everything now. The next morning pleased her with lightness and peace. She saw how her mother looked after her with tenderness and a smile. This morning was so peaceful and quiet that she felt ridiculous for her disturbing thoughts. At that moment, she asked her sister if she had finished her homework. Her sister said with a smile that she had done everything. Meanwhile, the young lady was sitting in her classes, very immersed in her notes. But a moment later, she heard that an extremely outstanding person would be speaking with them today. Their professor stated that they had invited the young man to help them get their research off the ground. The young lady was shocked, because she did not expect anything like this. Everyone present was shocked. They did not expect to see the young man in person. Meanwhile, Yusinil looked at the professor with her mouth open. But at that very moment, he felt her gaze on him. And don't waste a minute! He looked at her with a smile and didn't forget to wink. She was surprised that he winked at her in a way she thought was out of his style, as she thought he was shy and timid, but it seemed she was wrong. At that very moment, the young man joyfully shouted to the professor that it was a great honor for him to meet him. Without wasting a minute, the students took turns bombarding the young professor with questions. Yuseniel looked at the professor with a smile, as she understood that he had quickly gained popularity. After such a long lecture, the young man visited the garden, and while doing so, he thirstily drank water. After a moment, he sighed heavily, as he was tired. But in turn, he did not forget to thank the young savior who brought him water. She smiled and said that there was nothing to thank her for, and she also said that she was extremely surprised to see him. At that very moment, she noticed with a smile that he had now become a professor. He was taken aback and declared that it sounded even stranger coming from her. She smiled and said that he didn't need to be shy and that he should get used to it by now. As he rose, he said with a smile that he was very glad to meet her, as it saved him the trouble of writing her a letter. Worthing stated that some calculations based on her data and obtained a very curious result. At that very moment, he told her the name of the mountain on which new magical gates would open. A moment later, he threw her the key and declared that this was the key to his laboratory. Worthing said with a smile that he had taken the liberty of suggesting that she would want to become his assistant. The lady was shocked. He said with a smile that if that was what she wanted, he would be happy to welcome her in her new role. Worthing said with a smile that he very much hoped for a fruitful cooperation. Mount Guana. The place is shrouded in mystery. A vast part of the mountain range is completely covered by a thick fog of unnatural nature. Only those with a sufficiently large supply of mana can reach the summit, as even the most experienced mage can get lost in these dangerous lands. Now they knew that it was there that the next portal to another dimension would appear. She knew this fact, but she had no idea how to open that portal, and where exactly it would lead her, she also didn't know. In other words, she didn't even know if she would be able to return home. For some reason, this realization brought her relief. After all this time, she was desperately trying to find a way to return to her home world. After some time, the coachman smiled and said goodbye to the lady, and also said that he would pick her up later. She thanked him with a smile, but still, for a moment, she looked after him, puzzled. She was lost in her thoughts, as she knew that life in the new world had become much more important to her. After some time, the emperor greeted her with a joyful smile. The butler informed the emperor that he would certainly order that everything he asked for be brought. Tesfalin asked with a smile why she hadn't come for a long time, because he missed him to death. Ask for forgiveness, she said that she was too busy. He stated that he had written her many letters, but she had not written back. She said that she wanted to talk to him in person. Yuseniel said that they got a new project, and now she has more to worry about. He looked at her intently, as if he knew that she was very busy. At that same hour, the emperor declared that he would like to spend at least one day with her. At that very moment, he came close to her and began to kiss her tenderly. A moment later, the butler announced that he had brought everything the emperor had ordered, and the emperor said that he would do the rest himself. The young lady looked after him with embarrassment, as she did not understand what he had prepared for her. But after a few minutes, she looked at all the preparations with surprise. He smiled and said that he knew that she loved sweets very much. She thanked him with a smile for this, and he immediately hastened to tell her that she should try everything. Yuseniel, in turn, did not refuse desserts and began her meal. Meanwhile, the emperor really wanted to know what connected his beloved with that man. She praised the desserts with a smile and asked where he bought something like that. He said that he had simply hired a new pastry chef. He saw that she was very happy and therefore wanted to refrain from asking questions, because right now, her smile was more important to him. After some time, the young lady came to the professor. Worthing sighed heavily and greeted the young lady. But at that very moment, his expression changed, and he declared that she had come just in time. He quickly handed her the documents and stated that he needed her to sort the documents into categories. At the same time, he asked her to do this before the morning lecture. She was shocked, as there were a lot of documents. He smiled and apologized for the urgency, but stated that the dean had called him and he had to run. As he left, he thanked her with a smile and also said that he would help her when he returned. This is how her work as an assistant began. There was so much work to do that she was almost overwhelmed, but she still did everything she was told. A moment later, the young man raised his hand and declared that, unfortunately, he could not achieve the desired result. The young lady hurried to him because she wanted to correct a minor mistake. Worthing reflected for a moment on the convenience of having a competent assistant at his side. After some time, the young man was in his office. Picking up the documents, he noticed that the young lady was very diligent, as she had little time to complete the task, but she managed to do everything. A moment later, all his thoughts vanished as the lady entered and greeted him with a smile, and also informed him that someone had left a letter at his door. Worthing said they could become less formal and address each other by their first names. The lady was taken aback, as he was a professor, but after a few minutes of conversation, they nevertheless switched to a friendly manner. The lady then began to tell the professor about all the girls who were interested in him, but she said that she couldn't answer them and asked if he was dating anyone. He just laughed. But a moment later, he asked if she was dating anyone. He stated that she probably had a lot of admirers, so he asked if she had anyone in mind. She looked away from him, embarrassed, because she didn't know what to answer. The young man looked at her intently, as he did not hear an answer, but at the same time, he really hoped that she had no one. For a while, the young lady practiced fencing with her childhood friend. She dealt him blow after blow with ease. But a moment later, she asked him in surprise what had happened to him, as she had difficulty finding the schedule for the training. She was a little upset that he couldn't concentrate, and she said that if he didn't pull himself together, she would leave. Ethel sighed heavily and stated that it was all his fault, and also suggested that she finish training. He asked for forgiveness, but at that very moment, he saw his friend offer him her hand. She looked at him intently and said that something was clearly bothering him. Yusinil stated that she was as good a listener as she was a swordsman, so he could share his thoughts with her. After some time, the young people moved into the office and were silent for a while. The young man was puzzled that their friend had now become a marquise, because he knew that she would communicate with him less often. He said that it made him very sad. Yusinil looked at her friend in surprise. At the same moment, he announced that he had met her at the palace last week and came up to say hello. When he saw her, he ran up to her with a joyful smile and greeted her. At the same time, she looked at him coldly and greeted him in return. But, to his surprise, she called him formally. He shouted that she was cold only with him, since with other young people she behaved freely. He was shocked, because she behaved much more friendly with the other lord, and she even addressed him by name. He screamed that it had affected him so much that he could no longer think about anything else. Yusinil, why shouldn't he tell her about it directly? She said that the lady often came to visit him. She said that they were still friends, and she didn't see any problem, and he could also congratulate her on receiving the title. He sighed heavily, because he knew that everyone except him had already managed to congratulate her. Yusinil said that he could take the opportunity to ask what kind of man was accompanying her, since it was possible that the lord could be under the face, and he could win the heart of a lady for the sake of wealth and a solid status. Edel shouted to his friend that she was right, and as her friend, he could not allow this to happen. The young lady, in turn, looked away from her friend, as she knew that something more was involved. After some time, Yusinil returned home. Entering the room, she saw her sister, who greeted her with a smile. At that very moment, she rushed to her sister and hugged her tightly. Ganyel was in shock, as her sister smelled of alcohol. Ganyel asked her sister if she hadn't gone to training. The young lady looked at her sister with a smile and asked if she knew how much she loved her. Etel sighed heavily and asked his friend for forgiveness for everything. He sighed and declared that he and his father did not dare to object to the emperor, namely, when he made the decision to exile her family. So this story still troubled him. Ethel said in a loud voice that he was very sorry that everything had happened this way. She said with a smile that he was not to blame for anything, although she had to endure a lot in exile with her family. Now everything is fine. She said with a smile that the next time they saw each other, he should not forget to tell her how their mutual friend was doing. Ethel was surprised by such words, but at the same time happy. After some time, the young lady returned to her room. She was puzzled, as she had no idea what was going on in her friend's soul. Now she understood that he felt guilt, self-flagellation, a heavy burden of responsibility. At the same time, all of this was familiar to her, because it was all an integral part of her past life. A moment later, she turned around, not noticing how it had started to rain. She thought for a moment about her friends who loved each other, but she didn't know what happened between them. But she hoped that everything would work out. At the same time, the emperor was shouting angrily at his butler and telling him to leave immediately. He was furious, because his beloved had found time for a friendly duel and was drinking wine with him. He knew he had had enough, and at the same time, he wanted to get rid of him immediately, since he didn't want to let anyone near his precious beloved. After some time, the professor finished his lecture, but he also asked who would like to plant radiata radiata in their garden. Yuseniel raised her hand, and the professor smiled and praised her, telling her that she should come into his office. Yuseniel said with a smile that she would be very happy to come to him. After some time, the young lady held a beautiful flower in her hands. She thanked the professor with a smile and said that she would take care of her. She was happy because this flower was somewhat reminiscent of the weeping lily that she had liked very much in her past life. She was glad to see such a flower because it is extremely rare in their latitudes. The professor said with a smile that he was pleased to hear such a thing, and at the same time, he knew that the flower was in very good hands. Moments later, he asked the young lady to take the book to the temple, as the book in question should be kept in the church library, not theirs. After some time, the young lady slowly carried the book, knowing that she had read countless books, but had never seen anything like it. The Temple of Light was built in honor of the legendary god Lux. His shrines were numerous throughout the continent, but the largest was located in the capital of their empire. She wanted to know what the book was about, but she knew she wouldn't find out anything because it was written in an ancient language. But a moment later, the young lady froze in shock as she saw what was inside the book. Worthing, meanwhile, was collecting his thoughts, as he wanted to invite the lady to a dinner party. He wanted to know if she would refuse him if he asked her to accompany him, but he realized that all his questions were too straightforward. But a moment later, all his thoughts vanished as the young lady burst into his office like a whirlwind. He was surprised, as he assumed she was in class, but the lady stated that she had been let out early. A moment later, she told the professor with a smile that she would take one thing from him. She knew that with the help of an enchanted magnifying glass, she could decipher any text with ease. A moment later, she thanked him and rushed on about her business. Worthing tried to stop her, but to his regret, it was all in vain, as she quickly left, and he did not have time to tell her about the social reception. Yuseniel, in turn, hurried to her home, as she wanted to find something important in the book. She knew she had to try to figure out what exactly was in the book. That same evening, she quickly examined the book with a magnifying glass, but did not understand what the problem was. She was puzzled, as she knew that text was supposed to appear on the pages. But to her regret, instead of a new text, she saw that all the letters had turned black. She raised the issue that if she was unable to read the book with the magnifying glass, she would have to return it to the temple. The next morning, the young lady went to the temple. She had no idea that she would wander aimlessly around the temple site in Togo just to hand over the book and go about her business. Unfortunately for her, everyone she met only showed her the way. Yuseniel was puzzled, as she understood that she had been in the temple for a long time. But after a moment, she turned around, as she saw a large image of God. She stared at the image for a moment, not looking around. At that very moment, Kalisis approached the young lady and greeted her, and asked how he could help her. She smiled and said that she had brought a book. Kalisis asked if she liked the painting. She said with a smile that it was so, and in this image, the side turned out incredibly beautiful, and she admired the picture and lost track of time. At the same moment, she was upset and said that this painting somehow reminded her of something else. It depicted the first emperor, who was extending his hand to some black figure, and to this day, she was at a loss to guess who it could be. He said with a smile that he understood her. He asked if she was really talking about that clot of darkness in the painting of the creation of the empire. He said that she would not find a single mention of this creature, even in the most ancient chronicles, since the Lux was usually depicted as white. He asked her what she thought the message of the color black was, and who the mysterious creature was. Kalisis said that he hoped she would find the answer contained in the book he held in his hands. At that moment, he poured out sacred water that could help decipher the ancient text. Kalisis stated that as long as she didn't evaporate, she would be able to read this. The young lady was shocked. Kalisis asked with a smile if she would like to take a look. A tiny darkness covered the entire world, turning people to evil, once its continuation had neither a name nor even a specific form. But its power was all-encompassing, until one day, this pitch-black creature spoke to a mortal man. It told him that he would rule the world if he decided to taste its blood. Unable to resist the temptation, the man gave in to persuasion and tasted the darkness itself. He then shed rivers of blood to found his own state, which was called the Northern Empire. It turned out that the newborn monarch had made a deal with the devil. From that very time, not only the right to the throne was passed down from generation to generation in the imperial family, but also terrible curses, as well as power capable of plunging into horror the very existence of people. Her descendants will never be able to free themselves from the shackles of evil spirits and will forever remain under her total control. After reading this book, the young lady froze in shock. For some time afterward, she still wondered if everything she had read about was true. She knew that what she had been told was not a lie, so she wondered if her lover had also been touched by the curse. But in turn, she wondered who the man was who had given her the book. She wanted to know how he knew what she was talking about. Worthing approached the young lady and noticed that she was somewhat listless. He asked if she had caught a cold. She said with a smile that it was not that simple. She was just a little tired. Worthing sighed and said that she should go home early and rest. Yusinil asked if he really wanted to ask her something. Worthing timidly replied that he simply wanted to know if she would agree to accompany him to the Marquis's reception. He said that he must come with a companion, but found no one. But at the same moment he was taken aback, as the young lady said that she could go with him. Yusinil smiled and said that she would be happy to go, but he was puzzled by her condition. Yusinil said with a smile that she was fine, and that by the evening, she would be as good as new. That same evening, the young man stood quietly at the young lady's estate and waited for her. Yusinil approached him and said with a smile that it was very kind of the Duke to agree to lend him the carriage. He was taken aback when he saw the young, beautiful lady. Yusinil smiled and thanked him for picking her up. He said it was his duty as her escort. At that moment, Yusinil noticed that he looked different today than usual. He said with a smile that his cousin had made him dress up. After a moment of sweet conversation, they hurried to the carriage. But at that very moment, the young man shuddered, as a roar was heard behind him. He was puzzled and did not understand where the lightning came from on such a quiet evening. After some time, the young people entered the hall, and everyone froze in surprise, as they did not expect that the lady would be accompanied by such charming gentlemen. Everyone started whispering actively, as this was not the first time they had seen the young man. Worthing greeted everyone with a smile and introduced himself, stating that he was the Duke's brother. At the same moment, he stated that at the moment he was working as a professor at the academy. A moment later, the Marquis called the young man with a joyful smile. Worthing greeted the Marquis with a smile. The Marquis declared that he saw him, and memories came flooding back to him. Worthing told the young lady with a smile that the Marquis was very interested in their joint research work. At that very moment, Mark greeted the young lady with a smile and declared that he would not deny it, as he had heard about her. She said with a smile that it was a great honor for her, but he noticed that she was being modest, since she was famous throughout the empire for her intelligence and elegance. He said with a smile that it was not only he who thought so, but his son too. Moments later, he announced that it was time for him to go, but he wished everyone to enjoy a good evening. After some time, the young people finally left the noisy hall and went to the terrace. Worthing said he couldn't stand such events because they were noisy and everyone wanted to socialize. His companion said he was smart and single, which attracted women. Worthing asked if the ladies would lose interest in him if he started dating someone. She said that perhaps so. Worthing looked at the young lady at the same moment and called her. Worthing asked if she wanted to go out with him, but at that very moment, thunder rumbled and a terrible lightning bolt appeared next to them. The young lady did not hear his words and asked again what he said. The young man looked away from her, embarrassed, and said that he had not said anything. She sighed heavily as she saw that it had started to rain. Sometime later, the young lady visited the restricted section of the palace library. She searched for information, but unfortunately, all was unsuccessful. She was puzzled, as none of the books listed mentioned anything about the devil. Yusinil was puzzled, as she understood that this information was hidden so carefully that it was impossible to find a rain ban on the sections. Once the holy water evaporated from the pages of the book, they became illegible again. Then she decided to find the man who lent her the book, and then she went to the temple. But unfortunately, she was informed that the priest named Kalisis had never served in the temple. She was shocked and did not understand how this could be, because she saw him with her own eyes. The young lady was puzzled as she saw him vanish into thin air. Having barely managed to hand her the book, it seemed to her that he disappeared, as if he had been sent solely for this purpose. This worried her very much, and she didn't know what to do. But after some time, the young lady again began searching for information. She was taken aback when she saw the emperor in front of her, who had been calling her for some time. She looked at him in surprise and asked what he was doing in such a place, as she knew he had a morning meeting. The emperor sighed and said that he was very sad. She looked at him in bewilderment, but he again stated that he was upset. She asked what had happened and why he was upset. The emperor stated that she had been spending time with another man, despite her busy schedule, and that she had even taken a day off to meet him. Yusinil said that Etel was her friend and that he was in love with another. The emperor said that he was talking about the damned scientist. Yusunil asked in surprise if he was talking about the professor. Tesfalin was upset because she hid their relationship. He knew it because the young man asked her if she was in a relationship with someone or not. He said that she had many admirers, and at the same time, he wanted to know if she had anyone in mind. But Yusunil didn't answer then, and he knew perfectly well that other men would inevitably show interest in her. He knew that she could have turned him down, but she remained silent. Yusunil screamed that there was nothing between her and the professor. Tesfalin said that the professor was sure of the opposite. He had been following them for some time. Sitting quietly on a tree, he noticed a sweet picture. His beloved spoke to the professor with a smile, and then he saw the professor's funny expression. He was furious because he understood that this scoundrel liked his beloved. It drove him crazy that the young man asked her such a question. Yusunil looked at him intently and asked what exactly was troubling him. Yusunil said that even if the professor was in love with her, it didn't matter, because she didn't have any feelings for him. She approached her lover and stated that if he asked if she was considering him as a romantic partner, she was not. Yusunil told the emperor that he was the one and only for her. Yusunil said that from now on, she was not interested in other men, so she wanted him to believe her. At that very moment, she pulled away from him, waiting to see what would happen next. At that very moment, the emperor grabbed his beloved by the hand and pulled her towards him. Without a moment's hesitation, he passionately kissed his beloved. The young lady was a little surprised, as she did not expect such a thing. In a moment of passionate kiss, he spun her around, and a moment later laid her on the table. She looked at her lover with embarrassment, but she tenderly called him by name. He couldn't resist, and at that very moment, he pounced on her with kisses. After a while, she wondered if it was normal that they were lying in the locked section of the palace library. She sighed and said that if anyone found them like this, they would be scared. Tesfalin smiled and said that she didn't need to worry, as he had locked all the doors so that no one would enter. She said with a smile that it was very thoughtful of him. Tesfalin stated that he could spend this time alone with her. For this reason, he did not want to see anyone else. At that very moment, she touched him tenderly and noticed that he had soft hair. He asked her if she liked his hair, and he also wanted to know what else she liked about him. She said that she liked his eyes, nose, lips. He asked with a smile what else she liked. Looking at her lover, she declared that she liked his face and voice. He wanted her to continue, but the young lady looked away from him in embarrassment, having already listed enough. Then he kissed her tenderly and, drawing back, declared that she was sweet. She did not understand why he spoke as I did, as she spoke to him seriously. At that very moment, his face changed, but his eyes also changed. He fought with himself because he wanted to eat her. At that very moment, he tenderly touched her body and quietly called out. Tesfalin wanted to possess her completely. He wanted all of her without a trace. Yielding to his instincts, he kissed and licked her neck. At that very moment, Yusunil came to her senses, looked menacingly at her lover, and asked if he wanted to tell her anything. Tesfalin was taken aback, as he had not expected anything like this, and so he asked what she meant. Yusunil glared at him, but said nothing. But moments later, she asked if he thought she would never know about it. The emperor, in turn, froze in place in a daze. She said she thought they were close, and therefore he should have told her everything. But she assumed he intended to take the secret to his grave. He was scared because he didn't know what exactly she had found out. He wondered if she had found out that he could see people's souls, or that he made a deal with the devil. Tesfalin was scared and didn't know what to do. But at that very moment, he came to his senses when his beloved touched him, and he shuddered in surprise. Yusunil said she heard he had postponed an important meeting due to feeling unwell. She said there had been a terrible thunderstorm the previous evening, so she wondered if he had gotten caught in the rain and caught a cold. He breathed a sigh of relief and stated that nothing could be hidden from her. But he did not say anything about it because he did not want her to worry. She asked him to take care of his health. He hugged her tightly and said with a smile that he would take care of her. Hugging her, he said that he would do whatever she said. After some time, the young lady returned back to the estate. She raised that only she knew for sure because he tried desperately to hide the truth from her. But in turn, she wondered why he had hidden the truth. She wanted to know if he really didn't trust her. Yusunil understood that he had no other choice because the cursed blood of the first emperor flowed through his veins. She understood that this would not change her feelings for him because she loved him much more than he thought. She loved him so much that she almost decided to give up trying to return to her home world. The young lady was taken aback as she felt a burning pain in her chest. She did not know what to do as the pain spread throughout her body. She didn't understand what was happening at all and why she felt this way, because as soon as she forgot about the pain, it immediately returned. Periodic attacks of pain seemed to warn her that there was no place for her in this world. A moment later, the coachman announced that they had arrived, and the young lady slowly stepped out of the carriage. The man asked if everything was okay with her. She asked with a smile what he was talking about. The man said that he thought she had fallen in the carriage. She smiled and said that it was not so. He said with bewilderment that he must have just misheard. Yusinil thanked him with a smile for giving her a ride. Entering the estate, she met her mother. The lady told her daughter with a smile that she already knew everything, as this news was a pleasant surprise for her. She asked in surprise what the mother was talking about. Madame stated that her daughter had been named at an evening with some scientist. She wanted her daughter to invite him over. Yusinil quickly stated that there was nothing between them, and she was just working with him. Madame sighed heavily, as she felt ashamed of the one who had misunderstood everything, but she wanted to know everything about him without exception. The young lady froze for a moment, but her mother said with a smile that they had fresh tea leaves and they could have some tea. She immediately announced that she would quickly organize everything. Yusinil, looking at her mother, said that she would like to ask her something. Yusinil told her mother that she had always shown a great deal of interest in her personal life and that she sincerely wanted her to find a worthy match. She knew that a mother always wanted the best for her child, but then she wondered why her mother had never considered the emperor as her husband. She said that she personally found it strange, since he had been her closest friend since childhood. Yusinil looked at her mother intently and stated that she needed to know the reason. She wanted to know what he had done to deserve her disapproval. After some time, the madam and her daughter were drinking tea. Yusinil, without wasting any time on conversation, asked why his mother didn't like the emperor so much. She stated that she thought it wasn't just that he had changed his appearance. Yusinil told her mother that she knew something else about him. She wanted her mother to tell her everything. Madame sighed heavily and declared to her precious daughter that all she wished for her was a happy and peaceful life. She stated that when her daughter was born, she learned of a prophecy associated with her. The young lady realized at that moment that the prophecy really did exist. She recalled how an old friend had brought up the topic of the prophecy. Madame stated that she simply wanted to protect her from what she would have to face. Madame continued speaking, but the young ladies did not hear her. She anxiously asked her mother if she had a sore throat, since her voice had simply disappeared. The madam sighed and told her daughter that she was strictly forbidden to talk about it. The madam told her daughter that although she was her daughter, she also had her father's human blood flowing through her, which is why she could not interfere in her life. Yusinil asked if the emperor should have any influence on her future, something she could not tell her. Madame stated that this was so and that he was a threat. She asked with a smile, what kind of mother would expose her child to danger? At that moment, the young lady was taken aback. She came closer to her daughter and stated that she had no right to forbid them from seeing each other, but she would not want that. After all, that's what they were told. The young lady asked in surprise if the elf had really been told that. The madam stated that this was so, and they could not be given any influence on other decisions, even if it was about their own child, because this had been the case since time immemorial. It sighed and stated that if any of them broke this rule, their soul would begin to crumble, and there would only be darkness from then on. At that very moment, Madame hugged her daughter tightly, who stood frozen in a daze. The Duchess sighed and asked her daughter to remember one thing, that her love for her was unchanging. The Duchess said she would support her no matter what choice she made. Yusinil sighed heavily and hugged her mother tighter. She thanked her mother for her understanding and support, but she didn't see that her mother's hands were already starting to turn black. After some time, the young lady visited her small office. She slowly took out the box, which contained a beautiful stone. Looking at the stone, she remembered her lover. At the same time, the emperor sat in his office quietly making notes on his documents. But at that very moment, he was taken aback, as he felt the warmth of his beloved in the depths of his heart. Her touch was subtle, but gentle. Tesfalin wondered in surprise if she had thought of him again that night. He knew that if she only asked, he would immediately rush to her. The next day, the young lady continued her work with the professor. She sighed heavily after collecting the books. The professor asked in surprise if something was bothering me, as she looked extremely puzzled. Yusinil looked away with a smile and asked if it was really that noticeable. She sighed heavily and stated that she was simply thinking about what a useless daughter she was. He looked at her in surprise and said that he would be happy if he had such a daughter, because she was beautiful, hardworking, and smart, and on top of everything else, strong. He noted with a smile that she was so strong that she even carried heavy boxes with their books. The young lady only laughed in response. He asked if she really considered herself a bad daughter, because her views on life did not coincide with her parents. She sighed and said that was true. She said with a sad smile that her mother did not approve of her choice. Worthing said it was now clear why she was so concerned. Worthing said that if he were in her place, he would try to convince her mother that she had made the right decision. He said that anime could be used as an example of his research, as many thought that he was setting goals that were impossible to achieve. But he didn't want to give up and wanted to insist on his own, and at the same time, go to the end, because it was all because he decided so. Worthing sighed and stated that the same applied to her situation. He said that she was not at all obliged to live up to her mother's expectations, and if she proved to her that he could achieve everything on his own, then her mother would accept her position. Meanwhile, the young lady reflected on her mentor's words and realized that he was right, but she did not want to lose her family. She understood that it did not matter at all what was in the prophecy, since her spirit was strong and her will was unshakable. After some time, she returned home. But at that very moment, she turned around, because she heard her sister's voice. She asked in surprise what her sister was doing. The young lady said with a smile that she had been waiting for her. At that very moment, the young lady showed her sister a shiny envelope, which was covered with gold, and announced that they had been sent an invitation. Yusinil asked in surprise if the invitation had really come for both of them, although she did not understand from whom it had come. Ganyul said that the letter came from the emperor, and he invited them to the palace. At that moment, the lady covered her sister's mouth with her hand and said that they would continue their conversation in the room. Ganyul said with a smile that the emperor had written that he had prepared a gift for her, so she wanted to see it as soon as possible. Yusinil said with a smile that she could bring him herself and her sister wouldn't have to go with her. But her sister said that she wanted to go too. She said that he invited her too, so Yusinil had to give in. But at the same moment, she said that sister should not tell her parents anything. She said that this was an extra reason for concern, and so they would quietly leave in the morning. Her sister said with a smile that it would be their little secret. The next day, the young ladies arrived at the imperial palace and were greeted by the butler with a smile. The young ladies, in turn, greeted everyone present with a smile. The butler asked the girls to follow him with a smile. Yusinil was taken aback as she realized that he was leading them to the garden behind the palace. A moment later, she saw the silhouette of the emperor in the distance. He turned around and greeted them with a joyful smile. Yusinil froze for a moment in embarrassment when she saw her lover. Ganyul bowed and decided to greet the emperor according to all the rules of etiquette, but he said with a smile that they could skip the formalities. The emperor took the umbrella from the butler with a smile and said that he had hidden several boxes of gifts during the siege so the lady could go looking for it. Ganyul was very happy about this, and at that very moment, without delay, she ran for the gifts. Yusinil shouted at her sister not to run so fast, but her sister didn't listen to her, and yet she was rushing to get her gifts. Yusinil asked the emperor in surprise what this meant, but he didn't bother to answer her and kissed her at the same moment. He walked with a smile and said that he was very happy that she found time to visit him, and since the garden was now in full bloom, it was beautiful, and he wanted to show her everything. Tesfalin said with a smile that he thought it would be nice to meet her sister, since she cared about her. After some time, the young lady watched with a smile as her younger sister happily searched for gifts. A moment later, her sister found one gift, and the maids happily congratulated her. Yusinil thanked her beloved with a smile for giving them the opportunity to enjoy a wonderful spring day. At that moment, the emperor declared that he was glad to hear this, but he would like to ask her for a favor. He declared that he would prefer that she stop seeing the scientist. She was puzzled because he was back at it again. She said they were working together, but he also offered to make a bet with her. He said that if she wins, he will leave the smart guy alone, but if he wins, then send him away, or simply kill him. She asked in surprise if he was really speaking seriously now. Tesfalin said with a smile that he was, of course, serious, so she should try her best. Tesfalin looked closely at his beloved and said that he was sure it would be very exciting. After some time, the young lady put on her uniform and, looking at the emperor, declared that they could begin the fight. He turned around and looked at her with delight as he noticed that the training uniform looked great on her. He said that she certainly looked stunning in any outfit. But the young lady did not listen to him and immediately rushed towards him. Tesfalin was taken aback, as he did not expect her to start the fight so quickly. But at the same moment, he said with a grin that it was aggressive on her part. He parried her blow, but she easily jumped back and flew through the air. She landed on the ground with the same ease and grace. The young lady looked at her lover with a stern and menacing gaze and declared that he must use all the power he had hidden. She wanted him to take the fight seriously. He said with a smile that he would do so because he also wanted to win the bet. At the same moment, he rushed towards her, striking her. But the young lady easily repelled all his attacks. After a moment, they crossed their wooden swords. Then she noticed how her opponent was trembling. Yusanil looked at the emperor intently and asked if this was all his power. He said that it was so, and she asked in surprise if he was serious. He said that seriously, that was all his strength. At that moment, she looked at him with a smile and pulled back. He looked at her in surprise, as he did not expect this. But a moment later, she was already above him, and without wasting a moment, she raised her sword over her opponent. The young lady was not about to give up, so she dealt a terrible blow to her opponent. But she didn't want him to get hurt, so she hit him carefully and missed him. The emperor was shocked and shouted at her that she should stop. But the young lady stated that there were no breaks in battle. He was shocked and asked his beloved if she had always been so strong. She didn't bother to give him an answer to the question he asked. He was shocked and wanted to know what she had been doing all these years. Although she was born a half-elf, she was not that strong to begin with, but she trained, as her mentor mercilessly trained her physically. He told her every time that she was out of shape. He trained her non-stop as if her life depended on it. He said menacingly that she should not think about anything else and should focus on the goal in front of her. She could not give up either her past life or her current one. And if she needed to become stronger, she had to become strong. She wanted to do everything for her goal. At the same time, the emperor was shocked by her physical fitness because he did not expect anything like this. She knew that whether it sounded like academic disciplines, fencing, or magic, if her efforts were not enough, she would try even harder. At the same time, the emperor knew that the young professor had something in common with the research of his beloved. Tesfalin watched them quietly and saw that his beloved was working tirelessly. But this only irritated the young professor more than ever. He really didn't want to just kill him and get rid of him, but he knew his beloved would be angry if he did something like that. For this reason, he had no intention of killing or getting rid of him from the start. Instead, he planned to sacrifice one of his arms for the sake of a bet. It was a perfect plan on his part, as he assumed that his beloved would look after him. A moment later, he fell to the ground with a thud and declared that he was in pain. He thought so until he found out that she was stronger than it seemed at first glance. She told him to get up, as if the fight was not over, but he said that he was in pain and that his palm was especially painful. She said angrily that he wanted to fight her himself, but she was irritated because that was the limit of her strength. He was shocked when she beat him. She screamed that she had done something similar, and to teach him a lesson, at that very moment Tesfalin, with a smile, said that he gave up. As she left, she said she had won, and he had to keep his promise. Writhing in pain, he said she was evil, but he also stated that she did not touch his face because she liked it. He gasped as he felt shame, and if he had known in advance how everything would turn out, he would have simply shown her his body. Tesfalin said with a satisfied smile that if he showed her every part of his magnificent body, she would not beat him anymore. The young lady turned around and looked at him with embarrassment. Tesfalin began to stretch the threads on his shirt with a sick smile. He opened one eye, unable to wait for her reaction. But at that very moment, he was taken aback, as he saw that she was approaching him. At this, the lady was very embarrassed, but at the same time angry. He was taken aback and asked why she was walking towards him so frighteningly. He immediately said that he didn't know what he had done, but he was very sorry. At that very moment, he received from her. She understood that he definitely needed to say something, but she decided to put off all conversations until later. After some time, the young lady treated her lover's injuries. She stated that when people are romantically involved, it is very bad to spy on their every move, and he should know about it. Yusanil stated that there was no need to overdo it in this matter. She knew that it was all because of her, but she was still angry. She wanted him to just stop being jealous of the men around her. He sighed heavily, as this was difficult to do. After a moment, he asked how long she was going to tease him before she enjoyed herself. Yusinil said she had done everything, but he shouted that she should apply the medicine, she the other hand. But she said that he would figure out the rest himself. He said that he also had a bruise on his thigh. She looked at him sadly and said that he should handle it himself. A moment later, the young lady announced that it was time for her to leave. Tesfalin stopped her and offered to have dinner with the Vengeance. She said that she had to go because her sister was waiting for her, but he said that her sister had already returned home. She was surprised. He said with a smile that her sister was already at home, so she didn't need to worry. He said with a smile that they needed to wash before eating, and so he suggested that she go first. Although the young lady had been ready for the reception for some time, she noticed that her lover was meticulous in preparing her clothes. She was a little surprised because she didn't understand how he knew her size. A few minutes later, she entered the room and announced that she was ready. He turned around as he hadn't expected to see her so quickly. But a moment later, Tesfalin, with an embarrassed smile, declared that she was beautiful. And in this dress, she looked like an angel. She was embarrassed because he said such things as if it meant nothing. A moment later, he announced that he would like to wash himself. But there was only one bathtub in his room, and she used it. Looking away from her, he stated that he hadn't thought he should go right after her. Yusinil was very confused by his words. But at that very moment, she asked when they would have dinner. The emperor grabbed his beloved's hand and childishly declared that he was happy, because today was a special day. He said the day was special because he was going to have dinner with her, and so he was very excited. A few minutes later, they were sitting in a spacious hall. She asked if he always ate like this. The emperor said with a smile that this was not so, and that he had not been in the hall for a long time, since he usually ate in his room. At that very moment, she asked if he was there. He said with a smile that she had said earlier that he should eat. He didn't say it was easy, but she didn't need to worry. They ate in silence for some time, and the atmosphere was favorable. But still, the young lady, looking at her companion, wondered if he was a man who had made a contract with the devil. Or maybe he just had devilish blood running through him. After the meal, the emperor asked his beloved whether she would come next week. She said that if there was time, she would come. He looked at her with a smile and said that she should come back quickly because he would be waiting for her. Yusinil stroked his head with a smile and said that he was a good man. At that very moment, she thanked him for the wonderful evening and also informed him that she would soon visit the Imperial Library. She said with a smile that until then, he should behave well. He smiled back and agreed with her. After some time, the young lady slowly returned back, but at that very moment, she saw her comrade. She realized that this was her childhood friend. And so, at that very moment, she hurried towards him as she wanted to greet him. But at that very moment, she heard her friend's voice and quickly hid. Oren looked at the young man and asked what he wanted to talk to her about. He stated that he knew perfectly well that she was busy, so he wanted to get straight to the point. He wanted her to attend the next banquet with him. Edel said with an embarrassed smile that he would like her to be his partner. She was shocked and couldn't believe that he called her to invite her to the banquet as his partner. Edel asked in surprise, "Doesn't she need a partner?" She said that she needed a partner, but it didn't have to be him. Edel he was shocked and did not understand the reason for the refusal. She said that she thought he did not like going to such events with her. At that very moment, the young man froze, as he was stunned by her words. But a moment later, he declared that this was not the case at all. He sighed and, looking away from her, said that she was now a marquise. He said that there were a lot of rumors about her family, and she should know that more and more of them appeared every day. He said that she should strengthen her position, and it would be better for her to go with him, since he was the eldest son of the family and also an imperial knight. Edel said that he had received a lot as her partner, and now he wanted to repay her. At that very moment, he said with a smile that she could use it. A moment later, the young lady agreed to his proposal, and he blossomed before our eyes. He said with a smile that he would be flexible with her schedule, so all she had to do was let her know when she wanted to attend the banquet. Yusinil looked at her friend with a smile as he finally plucked up his courage. At that very moment, he invited her to go home together after work. She said that she had a lot of work and she would be late, but he assured her that everything was fine and he would wait for her. Meanwhile, the young lady went about her business with a joyful smile. She hoped that her friends would become closer soon. She slowly entered the office and greeted the professor. He looked at her intently and greeted her back, but she looked at the young man with bewilderment as she was seeing him for the first time. The young man greeted her with a smile and introduced himself, and also said that they would now be working together. Yusunil looked at him in surprise, as she didn't expect to hear anything like that. Yusunil asked Arden if he was really the Marquis's eldest son. Worthing said with a smile that the young man wanted to start attending the academy next term, so he said he would help him with his studies. Arden shouted with fire in his eyes that it was a great honor for him to work with them, and he would try his best. A moment later, the young lady showed him his desk. Arden smiled and told the girl that he had seen her before at banquets. She was surprised, but said that he seemed familiar to her. He shouted with a smile that he was very glad that she remembered him. At the same time, the young man watched them closely. Worthing looked away for a moment and stared at the young man. He didn't like this at all, as he saw the young man's embarrassed smile. He was puzzled and did not understand if there was another reason why the Marquis transferred his son to them. But he was still wary when he saw the way the young man looked at Yusunil. That same evening, the young lady leisurely returned back to his estate. She looked away when she heard sister calling her. At that very moment, the young lady pounced on her sister with a smile and declared that she loved her very much. Yusunil hugged her sister with a smile and stated that she was still a little child because she wondered when her sister would grow up. Genyel said with a smile that if she grew up too quickly, it would be difficult for her sister to hug her. A moment later, the butler announced that the young lady had received several songs and that he had left them in the office. Sometime later, she finally visited her office and saw many letters on her desk. But one letter caught her attention, as it was from the bear. She asked him about the man she met in the temple. She was interested in what he wrote. At the same time, he was glad that she still had not forgotten him, but he could not tell her anything that she wanted to know. He informed her that the man would not harm her, but she must control any decision. The young lady was puzzled. She wondered if the man had told her about the devil so that she could escape from her lover. She was taken aback for a moment, because her mother had told her the same thing. At the same time, she understood that everything had become even more complicated. After some time, Yusunil and his mother tried to save the plants, but all attempts were unsuccessful. The madam told her daughter that the local climate and soil were not suitable for the plant, as it was too sensitive to cold. After some time, the young lady again immersed herself in reading books, but she did not find any information. She was taken aback and turned around when her lover called her. He looked at her with a smile and stated that she really came back quickly, and he said that he missed her. She looked at him in surprise and greeted him, but at that very moment she asked why he had run away. Tesfalin stated that he had come running to her as soon as he had finished all the business in the palace. Tesfalin said with a smile that he wanted to see her at least a little earlier. She looked at him confused, as she didn't expect to hear something like that, but at the same time, she wondered if he couldn't use teleportation magic. He said with a smile that such magic used up a lot of mana, but at the same moment he noticed that there were a lot of books on the table and asked what his wife was looking for. She said that her flower was wilting and she was trying to find a way to save it, but she knew that magic could only help a healthy plant. But unfortunately, it had no effect on dying plants. Yusunil sighed, knowing that caring for the living was hard work. At that moment, the emperor thought for a moment. She looked at him intently and said that she wanted to tell him something. Yusunil said that before she could only guess, but now she was sure that Edel liked Oren. She said with a smile that it was true, and he tried very hard. But at the same time, she didn't know if anything would work out between them. She stated that she was going to the same event as them, so she would tell him how it went. He looked at her tenderly and said that he would look forward to hearing from her. Yusunil looked at her lover with an embarrassed smile. Meanwhile, Worthing asked in surprise if she would really go to the Count's event. She said that she would, and therefore she would need to adjust her schedule. She knew her friends were going to go there, so she had to go too. Worthing said with a smile that he too had received an invitation and was really considering whether he should go or not. He wanted her to go with him, but the young lady said that she could not go with him as they had already appeared together. She stated that if they continued to attend events, people would start talking too much. That's why she asked for forgiveness with a smile, because she hoped for his understanding. He sighed, as he understood that he could not do anything in this situation, but asked for links to them. She decided to go. Yusunil turned around and called out to Aiden. She asked with a smile if he would mind going with her to the Count's reception. He looked at her with embarrassment and asked in surprise if she was really talking to him. She said that if he didn't want to, she wouldn't force him, but he happily agreed, and she thanked him. Meanwhile, the young professor looked at them menacingly, as he did not like it at all. After some time, the young people arrived at the Count's reception, and the young man behaved gallantly next to his companion. She thanked him with a smile for accompanying her. But at that very moment, they noticed the professor, who was quietly waiting for them. He looked at the young people with a smile and greeted them, and also stated that it seemed that they had arrived at the same time. They were surprised that he came to such events, although he stated that he could go alone. Count Duty greeted the young people with a smile and stated that it was a coincidence that they had arrived together. He said with a smile that he really hoped they would have a good time. Entering the hall, they looked around, as they did not expect such luxury. The young lady looked at the fountain in surprise, as she did not know what kind of jewels were there. Coming closer, they noticed diamonds that were filled with manna. At that very moment, the young lady turned around as she saw her friends. She looked at them with joy, as they were beautiful. The young people said that they always attended events together, but there were no specific rumors about this. Worthing remarked that this was very strange, because if they were together so often, it meant that something was happening between them. At that very moment, the Count cried out and greeted the Marquise and the Lord. The young people greeted the Count in return with a smile. The Count asked the Lord with a smile when he was going to become a partner for his daughter. He said that she liked him so much that she could not sleep. At the same time, looking at his daughter, he said that the Lord simply had to dance with her at the reception. The Lord stated that this would be very difficult, as he wanted to focus his attention on his partner. The Count said that, despite this, he could dance with someone else, but the Lord declared that this was not what he wanted. He said that he simply did not want to leave the Marquise in the hands of others. At that moment, the Count could not resist and laughed wildly. The Earl told the Lord that he was now speaking like a stern man, but he was saying that he should meet different people to gain experience. The young man froze for a moment after the Count's words. At that very moment, the Count said with a smile that it seemed the Marquis was satisfied with everything. He asked the Marquise if she would allow the Lord to be free. Oren Cheyenne was the eldest daughter of the Marquis. Her parents were happy to say that the Emperor was watching over her and that the future of their family was in her hands. From her earliest childhood, her parents both wanted to make her the crown princess. They pointed out the crown prince to her every time and told her that she should take a closer look at him. They insisted that she should get closer to him. Madame said that this was all for the good of their family, and she should never forget this. Every time she agreed with her mother. A moment later, she plucked up her courage and walked up to the prince and greeted him. She bowed and introduced herself. She also said with a smile that it was a great honor for her to meet him. She saw that he did not react to her greeting in any way. But at that very moment, he turned around and declared that his eyes hurt. Oren. Looking at the prince, she realized that he was just an immature child. A moment later, the prince turned around and looked into the distance with a joyful smile as his girlfriend had arrived. He rushed towards her with a smile as he wanted to spend time with her. Oren noticed that a young lady had arrived, and she also saw how the prince reacted to her. Yusinil greeted the prince with a smile. Yusinil asked the prince how he was feeling, as they had not seen each other for a long time. Oren saw that the young lady had good manners and correct speech, even though she was several years younger than her. Oren walked slowly down the corridor, lost in her thoughts. She had given up all hope of getting the position of crown princess, since the prince had given his heart to another. She understood that it was all for the best, since she wasn't even interested in him. But a moment later, the young lady froze in place, as she saw a bee next to her face. She screamed because she didn't expect such a thing. She was very scared. But at that very moment, a young boy ran up to her. He shouted that it was dangerous and that she should just stand still and not move. He said she shouldn't worry too much because honeybees don't sting right away. At that very moment, he carefully covered the bee with his hands, and he slowly brought her to the window as he wanted to let her out. At that very moment, he easily opened his palms, and the bee flew away. He turned around and said with a smile that she had flown away and the young lady no longer needed to be afraid. At that very moment, he approached her, bowed, and wished her a good day. That day, she met him for the first time, and to her surprise, she didn't even have time to thank him for saving her. After some time, she approached her mother and asked her to pay attention to her. But a moment later, she turned around because she heard noise and laughter. Oren found the young man, but he was already engaged in conversation with another woman. Oren learned that he was the Marquis's eldest son, and she also learned that he was interested in the young lady. But she still wanted to come up and thank him for saving her. Plucking up her courage, the young lady approached them and asked with a smile if they were close. At that very moment, she introduced herself with a gentle smile and said that she really hoped they would become friends. As time went on, and as they grew older, she gradually began to realize that she had feelings for him. She understood that she liked him very much, and liked him as a person. And as a man, she also liked him, but she understood that these were all temporary feelings. She assumed that perhaps, over time, her feelings would disappear, just like her parents' feelings. From bitter experience, she knew that human emotions were always changing. Therefore, she assumes that her feelings for him would soon disappear. She knew this very well, but still her soul was uneasy. Unfortunately, they were never together without a third wheel. Edel, in turn, could not resist, and asked the Count what he wanted to say with such words. The Count said with a smile that the young man should calm down. He looked intently at the Marquise, as he expected an answer from her. Yusinil suddenly approached them and greeted them with a smile. She looked closely at her friend and asked if she was okay, since they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The young Marquise was unable to utter a word. The Count asked in surprise if they really knew each other. The young lady said with a smile that they were friends. She said that they have a special and strong relationship. At the same time, she noted that she meant not only the two of them, but also the Marchioness and the Lord. The Count was taken aback for a moment, as he did not expect to hear anything like that. At that moment, he sighed heavily and looked at the young lady with a grin. He stated that since she had returned from exile, she had not known when it was appropriate or appropriate not to intervene in a conversation. Everyone was taken aback for a moment, as they did not expect such harsh statements. The Lord was taken aback and shouted at the Count that he was behaving rudely and that he should immediately apologize to the lady. Everyone was taken aback for a moment and froze, as they did not expect this. The Count said with a grin that he was not going to apologize since he had told the truth. He said that he was not as rude as that common man, so the Emperor had no reason to punish him. Yusinil noticed that he was very proud of being noble. She asked if individual abilities weren't important too. He sighed and said that she was not mistaken, because if he had not valued her knowledge and the efforts of the Marquise, he would never have spoken to them. At that moment, the young lady could not stand it any longer and, in anger, threw her glove at him. She said that she had previously heard that he was quite skilled with a sword. The Count looked at the young lady with surprise and menace, as he did not expect such a thing. Yusinil immediately declared that she was challenging him to a duel. A few minutes later, the young lady was ready for the duel. She turned around because she heard someone calling her, but at that very moment, she looked in surprise at her professor, who was burning with anger and asking if she had really gone crazy. He didn't understand how she could even challenge someone to a duel at a reception. Young people were shouting that she should stop before it was too late. They said he was scary in battle because he had a lot of experience. But she said she was fine. They didn't need to worry. She left, leaving the young people behind, and they were very worried about her. After some time, the Count said with a smile that he would be ready when she was ready. He asked her if she liked the uniform, and also informed her that Ruby and Lord Bonhart would be the judges. Ruby looked at the young lady as her father mocked her. Yusinil sighed and declared that everything was fine and they should not waste any time. She wanted to start as soon as possible, and the Count supported her in this. A moment later, the young man raised his hand and announced the start of the duel. Without wasting a single minute, the Count swung his sword and rushed towards the young lady. He struck her with ease, waiting to see what would happen next. But the young lady parried his blow with the same ease. He was surprised because he did not expect such a thing. But at the same moment, he swung his sword again, as he intended to strike again. He struck back at her again, but the young lady dodged the blow with grace and ease. Everyone present was shocked and scared, as they saw that she almost cut herself. The Count looked at his opponent with fury, because he really thought she was better. The young lady, in turn, only smiled a satisfied smile. He saw her smile and was taken aback. But this was his biggest mistake, because at that very moment, she easily knocked his weapon out of his hands. Everyone present was surprised, as she easily dealt with him in a short time. Ruby was shocked and appalled by what she saw, as the lady defeated her father. At that very moment, the man declared that he had lost fair and square. She turned around and looked at him, not expecting to hear that. He knelt before her and declared that she had won, and he was admitting his defeat. The Count stated that he had been presumptuous and had underestimated her abilities, but he hoped that she would forgive his vanity. At that moment, she extended her hand to him and, with a smile, declared that she accepted his apology so he could stand up. The Count looked at everyone present with a smile and asked if they liked the performance. Moments later, he announced that they could begin the real celebration. After some time, Yusinil changed her clothes and while doing so, she looked for her friends in the crowd. Yusinil turned around as she heard someone calling her. Ruby looked closely at the young lady and asked shyly if she could talk to her. Yusinil looked at the girl with bewilderment, as she did not understand what he wanted to talk to her about. Ruby told the young lady with admiration that she was simply incredible, and she wondered how she managed to handle the sword so accurately, since she had studied fencing a little herself, but she had never seen such a wonderful person as Yusinil. She said with admiration that the young lady was simply amazing, and in a hurry, she asked the young lady if she could practice with her a little later. Yusinil said with a smile that they could train together when they had the opportunity. Ruby was incredibly happy about this, and happily thanked the young lady for this opportunity. A moment later, she bowed and said that she would ask someone from her family to send her an invitation. Yusinil looked closely at the girl, as she did not look like her father's wedding at all, and in some way, she reminded her of her sister. After some time, the young lady tenderly said goodbye to her friend. At the same time, her friend thanked her for the evening. Yusinil said with a smile that she had not done anything wrong, and she was glad to see them, because a lot of time had passed since their last meeting. Yusinil, in turn, looked at her friends with a smile and said goodbye to them, and also wished them good night. They looked after her intently, also wishing her a good night. Oren looked closely at her friend and saw that she was pure and caring, and therefore she simply could not feel jealous. She knew it was only natural that her friend deserved love. At that moment, the Lord looked intently at his companion and asked if they could already go to their carriage. She sighed and said that they would do so. After some time, the young people were riding back home, but the atmosphere in the carriage was not very pleasant. At that very moment, the young man could not stand it and asked his companion for forgiveness. She looked at him in surprise and asked why he was apologizing. He sighed as if he knew that everything about the banquet had turned out awkward because of him, and she found herself in this situation only because he insisted on his own way. He said that he was truly ashamed of his actions and he regretted it. She sighed and stated that, unfortunately, she could not accept his apology. She stated that he had really done nothing wrong, so he did not need to apologize to her. At that moment, the young lord stated that he would like to give her something. She looked at the small box in surprise and asked what he had given her. The lord stated that he had prepared a gift for her. Although he knew it was late, he still wanted to congratulate her on becoming a marquise. Oren was incredibly happy about this, but at the same time, thanked him with embarrassment. He looked at her with a smile and said that he was very happy that she liked the gift, as it was nice to see her smile. Oren was taken aback, as she did not expect such a thing. She was confused by his words. At this point, the young lord asked if she would like to try on the necklace, as he could help her if she did not object. Despite her companion, she sheepishly stated that she could manage on her own, so he did not need to worry. He was taken aback and agreed with her, but in turn wondered if he had said something wrong, as a dead silence reigned between them again. After some time, the young lady stood quietly and looked at various books in search of information. But at that moment, she noticed a commotion around her. She turned around as if she wanted to find out what had happened, but at that very moment, she bumped into the young man. Yusinil, in turn, was taken aback, as she did not expect such a thing, and at that very moment, she raised her gaze to the young man. But a moment later, she screamed, as she saw in front of her an emperor whom she had not expected to see at all. She looked around nervously and asked why he had come to her, since there were many people in the hall. He stated that she had not visited the Imperial Library for a long time, and she had not appeared in the section of forbidden books, so he had come to look for her. A moment later, he stated that she needed to come with him, as he wanted to show her something. The young lady agreed, but when he brought her into the greenhouse, she was very surprised. Yusinil looked around with surprise, as she didn't remember anything like this happening in the Imperial Palace. A few minutes later, she entered the greenhouse and froze in shock as she saw a whole field of flowers. The emperor stated that she loved these flowers, so he planted them for her. He also informed her that all possible types of magic were cast on the greenhouse so that the flowers would always bloom and nothing could harm them. She was surprised that he cast magic on the flowers. He declared that the flowers in the greenhouse would never wither. She was surprised that he would do something like that for her, but at the same moment, he declared that this way she would visit the palace more often, since there was something in the palace that she liked. Yusinil turned around and looked at her lover, puzzled. At that moment, he came closer to her and hugged her tenderly. Then he quietly said that he would do anything for her. Tesfalon said with sadness in his voice that if she wanted, he would change everything in the palace for her. At that very moment, Plucking up his courage, he asked her to become his empress. He wanted them to live together in the palace, and for her to be by his side always. Tesfalin sighed heavily and asked his companion to give him an answer. He asked again if she would marry him. He did not hear an answer, but still continued to ask whether she would marry him or not. He wanted her to become his empress. The young lady, in turn, looked away from him with a saddened expression, but did not answer. Tesfalin looked at her with fear and asked why she didn't tell him anything. He wanted to know if something had happened. She apologized and stated that she had to finish something right now because she had to find out something. He asked if she really meant the thing she had been looking for since childhood. She said that it was so, because this research was the task of her whole life. For this reason, she could not give him an answer right now. She sighed heavily and said she was very sorry. He asked tremblingly if she didn't want to marry him. He asked if she didn't want to be together. He said it seemed like she never liked him. But she said that wasn't true. Tesfalin said that if that wasn't the case, then she could just marry him. Trembling, he said that it seemed the reason she didn't want to was because she was disappointed in him. At that very moment, the young lady could not bear it any longer and, grabbing his hand, kissed it to calm him down. After a moment, she pulled away from him and stated that she really liked him and cared about him very much. But research was not in the same category, and it was the most important goal in her life, so she needed more time to complete the research. She looked closely into his eyes, which were full of tears, and asked him to give her some time. After some time, she said goodbye to him with a smile and said that she would come to him soon. Tesfalin said goodbye to his beloved with an innocent smile. He stood quietly for a moment, watching her walk away. He knew he could wait a little longer, but he didn't want her to make him wait too long. Meanwhile, he was taken aback as he heard the demon inside him, who was telling him that he could take away her freedom so that she could never escape from him. He was told that he could take her and make her his. In this case, he could make a decision without holding back his desires. Tesfalin knew he couldn't do it because she would hate him, but the demon said that love required control. If he gave her free rein, she would leave him, but he could make her stay by his side, and that was true love. The demon whispered to him, but the emperor could not stand it and ordered the demon to leave him alone. Unfortunately, he was unable to control his powers, and after his outburst, all the windows suddenly broke. He slowly left the place, but at the same time he heard everyone whispering in fear as they could not understand what had caused this. After some time, Ruby visited the young lady and thanked her with a smile for the invitation. But without wasting a minute, Ruby gave the young lady a small bag with beautiful stones, and Yusinil was surprised to ask what she had given her. Ruby shouted that she had given her the mana stones from the diamonds, bringing them as an apology for that day. The young lady was taken aback and cried out that she could not accept something so precious. But Ruby was adamant and asked her friend to accept the stones. Yusinil was taken aback and stated that, in that case, she would gladly accept them. Yusinil looked at the young lady intently and stated that no matter how the situation turned out, she should not let her head drop so easily. Ruby said with a smile that she knew this, but still continued to do such things. For this reason, she did not devote many meetings to it. Yusinil saw the girl speaking cheerfully. At that very moment, Madam came out to her daughter and announced that they had a guest on the doorstep, and she had to see him out. She didn't understand how her daughter could stand at the door for so long, because it was impolite. The moment she saw the young lady, she said that there must be an elf in their family. Ruby looked at the madam in surprise and said that it was true, but she wanted to know how she found out. Ruby stated with a smile that her mother had inherited elven blood, and her great-grandmother was elven, and her name was Puriel. Madame was taken aback because she knew her, but she did not know that she had come to the Empire. Reuben sighed heavily and said that it was a very long story. Madame said with a smile that they could go into the house, and the young lady would then tell her everything. After some time, they were sitting in the living room, drinking tea and chatting cheerfully. Yusinil looked at Ruby with a smile and asked if she minded if she called her by her first name. Ruby said with a smile that of course she didn't mind. Yusinil said that in that case, she could also call her by her first name. Ganyel asked her new acquaintance why her name didn't end in L. Ruby said that only one generation can use names that end in L. Yusinil looked at the girl with a smile, since she now understood why she reminded her so much of her sister, because she also had elven blood, and she was very glad that her sister and her new acquaintance got along with each other. For some time, her young lady leisurely went to the laboratory, but on the way, she met her friend, who had arrived very early. He asked if she would like to give him a few minutes of her time because he wanted to tell her something. She said with a smile that they could go into the office and talk there, but he said that it was not worth doing. Yusunil looked at him in surprise, as she didn't understand why he answered like that. He stated that he needed to discuss something very personal and confidential with her. Arden sheepishly said that he knew very well that only a short time had passed, but after spending some time with her, he had come to admire her deeply. He saw how she put all her effort into everything she did, and it inspired him greatly. Arden stated that he wanted to become a person like her. He said that, in particular, that day he was deeply touched by the way she risked her life for her friends. He said that his feelings for her were full of masculinity and selflessness. She looked at him in surprise, as she did not understand what he was talking about. At that moment, he looked at the young lady with embarrassment and declared that he simply could not help but fall in love with her. He said that he respected her and loved her, and that is why he always wanted to be with her. He shouted that whether it was happiness or sadness, he always wanted to share these feelings with her. Arden looked at the young lady intently and asked if she would marry him. Yusunil froze in shock as she did not expect anything like this at all. After a moment, she looked at the young man and asked if he understood that this was an unusual situation. He sighed and stated that he understood that perfectly well. He said he knew perfectly well that it was customary for families to send proposals, but he thought it better to ask the young lady's opinion first. She froze in place, rooted to the spot, not knowing what to answer him. He said that if they involved their families in this, there would inevitably be a lot of gossip, and he didn't want to subject her to that. She was taken aback and stated that he was the eldest son of the Marquis, which meant that he was his successor. She said that if he married her, he would become the son-in-law of a higher-ranking family, and he would also have to renounce his title. He shouted that he knew it, but she was more important to him than the title. Arden said that he knew perfectly well that perhaps he was not good enough, but if she agreed, he promised that he would live only for her. She sighed heavily and thanked him. At that very moment, the young man blossomed before our eyes. She looked away from him and declared that she knew perfectly well that he was a good man. He stated that marriage does not mean that people have to be passionately in love with each other, and that if they gradually strive to get to know each other better, then everything will work out for them. Yusunil said that she was not going to get married anytime soon. He froze in shock, as he had not expected this. Yusunil sighed and stated that she didn't have time to get married. He asked if it was all because of her research. She said that it was, and she was sure that he knew about it since they worked together in the same office. Yusunil said that she would definitely see everything with her own eyes someday, but it would be a long journey for her. She understood that she had to finish her research because she wanted to return to her world, to her past life. She said that she didn't know when it would all end, and now all her attention was focused on research. She understood that this was enough, and he would leave her alone. But the young lady was taken aback with surprise when she heard that he would not give up. She asked what he meant. He said that during her research, there would come a time when she would want to settle down, and he would wait for her until that moment came. He said that maybe she had refused him this time, but he would wait for her. She was taken aback and shouted that he didn't have to do that. He bowed and stated that it was entirely up to him, so she could continue to do what she wanted. Yusunil froze for a moment and called out to him, but it was all in vain. She didn't expect this and hoped that she had explained everything to him to the worst, but to her surprise, failure awaited her. He unexpectedly proposed to her, and she didn't know how to behave with him now in the laboratory. She understood that they would now be awkward with each other. But a moment later, the young lady was taken aback as the ground beneath her feet suddenly began to shake. Looking back, she heard a scream, as there were people near her who also felt the earth shaking. Yusunil was taken aback when she heard the announcement that a terrible earthquake had been recorded, and all academy students were required to leave this place and find a safe place. At that very moment, the young lady hurried to her sister. She looked around for her sister, but after a few minutes, she finally found her. Yusunil ran to her sister and asked if she was okay and if she was hurt, but her sister stated that everything was fine. She hugged her sister with tears in her eyes and said that she was very scared. Yusunil, hugging her sister, hastened to calm her down and also said that they would go home right away. After some time, the young ladies rushed back home. At the same time, she wondered why such a strong earthquake had happened, and she had a very bad feeling. She assumed that this was some kind of warning from above. After some time, the young ladies returned home, and their parents hurried to them. Madame looked at her daughters with joy, as she was glad that everything was all right with them. The Duke told his wife with a smile that, now that he knew the children were safe, he had to go. Yusinil, surprised, asked her father where he intended to go. The Duke stated that the East Tower had collapsed due to an earthquake, which was why there was a fire there, and he needed to go there. A moment later, a messenger from the Imperial Palace arrived to them. He hastily handed the Duke a small scroll and stated that an official document had been sent to him. The Duke opened the document and was taken aback by surprise. He was puzzled and did not understand the purpose of the Emperor's decision, but the young lady hurried to her father as she wanted to know what had happened. The Duke sighed heavily and announced that he had received an order for execution. At that very moment, he showed the scroll to his daughter. He reported that the Marquis's eldest son had been sentenced to death. The young lady was taken aback by shock, as she had not expected anything like this at all. Without wasting a minute, the young lady headed to the palace to see her lover. She understood that she urgently needed to meet him. A moment later, she saw the butler, who looked at her in surprise. He quickly shouted to the knights to open the door immediately. Yusinil greeted the butler hastily. He quickly wrapped her in her wet coat. A moment later, the young lady, asking for forgiveness, went out into the palace. She passed the servants and hurried towards the emperor. Yusinil was a little puzzled because she was heading straight to the emperor's chambers, but no one stopped her. She sighed as she realized that everyone already knew about them. At the same moment, she opened the doors of the emperor's room. Entering the room, she called him. He turned around and greeted her with a fierce grin. But at that very moment, he asked what had brought her to him at such a late hour. She looked at him menacingly and asked what he was going to do. He looked at her in bewilderment and asked what she was talking about. She said that the conversation was now about the fact that he intended to execute the Marquis's son. Tesfalin asked in surprise if she had come to him to talk about another man. She was shocked and shouted that now was not the time for jokes. But he was not joking at all. She was furious and screamed that she had read the official order and already knew everything. She was shocked because he was planning to execute the young man because evidence of treason suddenly appeared. She screamed that he was too harsh. The emperor declared that this was not so, and there was one reason why he should die. Tesfalin approached his beloved and knocked her down on the table, but at the same moment, he asked how the young man dared to leave his beloved and marry him. She was taken aback as she did not expect him to find out about it. At that very moment, the emperor declared that this was his greatest sin. She remained silent as he tenderly kissed every strand of her hair. At that very moment, he could not stand it and proposed to her to marry. He said that then they would be able to wake up in the same bed and live together, and then they would be able to see each other whenever they wanted. Tesfalin said that he wanted her to look only at him because he loved her very much. Without wasting a single minute, he tenderly began to carefully untie her blouse with his teeth. At that moment, she began to tremble and tears flowed from her eyes. He looked at her in surprise, as he had not expected such a thing. She said that she did not like it when he did such things because of her. With bitter tears, she said that she really hated it. The emperor was immediately taken aback, because he did not expect such a thing. Trembling, she said that she did not want him to be such an emperor. She did not want him to stain his hands with senseless blood. She didn't want him to do it, especially because of her. At that very moment, she touched his heart, but she didn't feel the beating in his chest. She knew he used to be kind, soft, and gentle, but now he had become cold. She wondered if it was all because he no longer had a heart. She was puzzled because he gave her his only precious heart. Yusinil sighed heavily and told the emperor that she simply wanted him to let the young man go. She sighed and asked him to spare the young man. At that very moment, he agreed with her. She asked in surprise if he would really do this for her. The emperor stated that he would do it because she wanted it. Tesfalin looked at her with a smile and declared that he would do anything for her. He said he just wanted her to know that only she could do this to him. At that moment, he extended his hand and asked her to come with him to a place. Moments later, they descended into the dungeon, the emperor wondering how much he could show her. She sighed and asked how much longer they had to go. The emperor stated that they were almost there. A moment later, she was taken aback as she saw the terrible statue, which was filled with darkness. Yusinil had been to the palace many times, but she didn't know that there was such a place in the palace. Moments later, the emperor announced that they had arrived. He sighed and stated that there was a secret hidden here that he wanted to show her. He wanted to know how she would react when he showed her everything. He didn't know if she would be scared of him or if they would become closer. Yusinil, upon entering the dungeon, was taken aback for a moment and stated that there was someone in the distance. She looked closely and saw that there was a man lying there, but she wanted to know who it was. He said that it was the first emperor. He sighed and informed the young lady that in front of her was the body of the first emperor, the founder of the Northern Empire. He informed her that a spell of eternal preservation had been cast on it. Tesfalin revealed that he had been kept under guard in the palace since the founding of the empire until now, and he wondered if she would accept him in the end. A hidden room deep underground in the imperial palace. It was a grotesque thing created for the demon so that it could exist on Earth even in the absence of a contractor. Emperor Joda was the first human to make a pact with a demon. The demon inhabited his body and provided justification for interfering in the human world. With his new strength, he waged numerous wars. But in the process, gradually and very slowly, the demon began to absorb him. Before completely losing his body in the last moment of his sanity, he barely managed to repel the demon by sacrificing his heart and dying. However, the death of the first emperor did not mean that the demon also disappeared. The blood and sins of the demon were passed on to the descendants of the imperial family, which continued to this day. Tesfalin was well aware of the fact that he might not be able to escape the fate that befell the first emperor. He looked closely at his beloved, wondering what kind of reaction she would show him. He understood that she might be afraid of him and find him unpleasant. He didn't know what to do in such a situation. He didn't know anything like this, but he understood that without her, he would simply be lost. But a moment later, the young man was taken aback. As she cried out with a joyful smile, she looked at the emperor's body in surprise, as she saw an incredible picture, because the corpse looked as if he was still alive. She was curious about what true power the emperor possessed, so that even after death he could wield such might. Tesfalin Yu, in turn, was taken aback, as he did not expect such a reaction at all. She turned around and said with a smile that she was interested in how the magic of eternal storage worked. Turning around, she asked if such magic was even possible. At that very moment, she declared that she wanted to choose this as a topic for her next research. She asked her lover what he thought about this, but at that very moment she looked at him in surprise, as he was laughing. Tesfalin, in turn, could not resist and burst into wild laughter. He understood that this was exactly the reaction he expected from her. At the same time, he did not understand how she could be so charming. She looked at him in surprise, with bewilderment on her face. He smiled and stated that he would support her research in any way he could. A moment later, he smiled and asked her to leave, knowing that it was not a good idea to linger in such a place. Moments later, they left the dungeon, with Tesfalin asking if they could get married after he waited for her to finish her research. She sighed and stated that she would tell him if he answered her question. He was glad of that. She asked if the earthquake in the capital and the collapse of the Eastern Tower were his work. Tesfalin was taken aback, as he did not expect such a question. But at that very moment, he turned around, and his face changed. She sighed heavily as she realized that he was involved in everything that was happening. She didn't understand why such things happened every time she was around. Yusinil asked the young man to stop what he was worried about, because what he was worried about would never happen. He sighed and said that he would not do that again. Yusinil told the emperor that he looked out of place. She also said that she would be by his side, so she suggested that he go to bed. He asked in surprise if she would really go with him. She sighed and said that she was serious, and that she would be by his side all night. Tesfalin was confused by such words of his beloved, but he did not understand why she decided so. At that moment, she sighed and declared that she understood everything, and in that case, he would just go home. In a hurry, the young emperor grabbed her hand and shouted that he did not want her to leave, and at the same time, he asked her to stay next to him. He said that we will not ask for anything more. Tesfalin understood that she could see her soul and could not know her true feelings, so he asked if she was angry with him, but she said that she was not angry, and after her words, he felt relieved. A moment later, the young lady smiled and told her lover that she would stay by his side so that he could sleep peacefully. Tesfalin smiled sheepishly as he was glad of this. Yusinil stated that she would be by his side in the morning, so he didn't have to worry about her disappearing. He said with a smile that he felt like he was a child now. Now he was truly happy because he loved her. The young lady looked at the emperor with a gentle smile. After all, looking at him peacefully, it seemed to her that nothing had happened. But in turn, she wondered if this was really normal. Today, she saw the body of the first emperor who made a pact with the demon and his constantly changing appearance. All of this continued to baffle her. The next day, the young lady happily sorted through the documents. After everything that happened, her friend's death sentence was overturned. However, evidence of the rebellion did not disappear. So, he was ordered to leave the capital. He was spared, but nothing could return to its place. Meanwhile, the young people were talking to each other and discussing the recent earthquake. But a moment later, their conversation took a different direction, and they talked about the need for the emperor to introduce a new empress. Now, the young lady understood why her lover was talking about marriage again. The young men said that they had heard that a banquet would soon be held in honor of the emperor's birthday, and they were interested in what statement would be made at the banquet. Yusinil realized that even though she had made a fuss in the palace a few days ago and spent the whole day there, not a single rumor had been spread. She realized that her lover really had everything under control. She knew that if word got out that she had spent the night with the emperor, there would be an uproar. The fact that there was absolutely no talk about concrete spoke volumes. A moment later, she was taken aback as the young ladies called her and asked her to stop. Yusinil looked at them with a smile and asked what they wanted. The young ladies greeted her with a smile and also informed her that they had a few questions for her. They said that the young lady had been close to the emperor since childhood, and they had also seen them together at a reception with the duchess. Yusinil looked at them in surprise, but said that they had known each other since childhood. The young ladies asked her if she knew who the emperor would be attending the upcoming birthday banquet with. They asked if she knew anything about it. Yusinil asked in surprise why they asked about this. They said that they thought that since she and the emperor were such good friends, she should know about it. The young lady was taken aback and stated that she knew nothing. They asked if she thought the emperor should marry since he had already reached adulthood. Yusinil stated that, in her opinion, he should decide such a question himself. She said that she really didn't know anything for sure, but there was one thing she could tell them. The young ladies immediately perked up as they wanted to hear what she really knew. She looked at them intently and sternly declared that they should think when they said something. They were taken aback because they did not expect such a thing. Yusinil said she felt it was very impolite to ask someone such personal questions, especially someone they barely knew. They were taken aback and froze in shock on the spot, as her words sent shivers through them. At that very moment, they asked for forgiveness for their rudeness. As she left, she stated that she had also gone a little too far with her statements, and they could simply forget about her words. They quickly bowed their heads to her and sincerely apologized. Yusinil left the girls in a very bad mood. At the same time, she was puzzled by everything that had happened because she had simply hoped that the rumors would not spread. She sighed heavily because she was contradicting herself, and it was stupid of her. Before she realized it, time had flown by, and the day of the banquet in honor of the emperor's birthday had arrived. Meanwhile, all the aristocrats had gathered for the banquet. After some time, the young ladies arrived at the banquet, with all eyes fixed on them. Ganyel cried out with joy, as she had not expected such luxury. She told her family that she wanted to go and look around as soon as possible. The madam asked her daughter with a smile not to go far, as she had to stay close to them. A moment later, the Duke approached them. He looked at them with a gentle smile and noticed that they all looked absolutely stunning. He said that today in the palace, their family would shine brighter than anyone else. The lady approached her husband and stated that he looked very exhausted. She suggested that he had not slept for several days because of work. He smiled and stated that seeing her and the children made him feel better. A moment later, the young ladies entered the hall. Ganyel called out to her sister that Ruby was next to them. Ganyel said with a smile that it seemed like the lady hadn't noticed them, so she would like to go and greet her first. Yusinil reached out to her sister and shouted that she shouldn't run like that. But at that very moment, she turned around as if someone had called her. She was surprised because she saw her friend. Oren smiled and told her friend that she looked amazing today. Yusinil smiled and said that her friend also looked great, and asked her friend how she had been doing lately. The lady stated that she had been busy since she became the marquise, and was constantly busy with things to do. Yusinil, with a smile, said that she was sure that she was doing well. Yusinil immediately noticed the beautiful and new necklace. She told her friend with a smile that it was very beautiful, and at the same time, it looked luxurious. Her friend thanked her shyly and said that it was the Lord who gave it to her. Yusinil said with a smile that the Lord gave her a wonderful gift as a congratulation, and it was very thoughtful of him. Oren sighed and said that she had been seeing him a lot lately, and her feelings were confused. Yusinil understood her friend and said that it seemed to be really exhausting for her. She smiled and stated that it was true, and at first she just needed his help. But since they started spending more time together, things had become different. And now she didn't even know what she really wanted. Yusinil came closer to her friend and took her hand. Yusinil looked at her friend intently and stated that everything was fine and she didn't need to rush. But on the contrary, she needed to think everything through carefully. She told her friend that she didn't have to force herself to distance herself if her heart didn't want to. She said that she didn't have to decide that right now. The young lady looked at her friend with a smile and noted that she was right, and she did not need to rush her decision. She thanked her friend with a smile for her support and care. But a moment later, everyone turned around because they heard some noise. At that very moment, everyone present was informed of the emperor's arrival. Yusinil froze for a moment and looked at us with embarrassment at her lover, since he was simply at his best. The thought of having to meet and greet all the people was already making him tired. But he understood that he had to deal with the feelings of greed and envy that were hidden behind the false smiles. He understood that he had to let the frightening energy pass through himself. Tesfalin clearly felt what was going on in their souls, but he knew that he had to do this. And yet, only the opportunity to see his beloved gave him strength. He grew stronger at the thought that he would soon see her. So a moment later, he walked into the hall with a smile on his face. Everyone greeted him and rejoiced. Tesfalin looked at everyone present with a smile and sincerely thanked everyone for coming to him from far away. Today was his birthday. But more importantly, they all gathered to celebrate the prosperity of their empire. He said that they had gone through countless trials and hardships, but still stood firm. And this was only possible thanks to the dedication of everyone present. So he wished everyone to continue moving towards their bright future. A moment later, he and all the guests present raised their glasses. The guests present joyfully shouted and congratulated the emperor on the holiday. The young lady looked at the emperor with a gentle smile as she saw that he had become strong. She finally saw that he had become a respected emperor, but there were times when he seemed fragile to her. Then, he tenderly asked her for a hug, but now she saw his overwhelming presence over everyone, and it surprised her, but she knew all the versions of him. She saw every side of him. It seemed to her that their future together would be good. But at that very moment, the young lady felt a burning pain in her soul. It seemed to her that her heart was being torn into pieces. It was as if a sharp knife had been stabbed into her heart again. It was the same pain she felt when she was dying in her past life. In that state, she could not do anything. She understood that if the pain did not go away, she would not be able to make any promises. A moment later, she jumped as she heard some noise. Turning around, she saw her sister, whom I happily shouted to her. The lady asked her sister why she was wiping her face. Yusinil said with a smile that it was just hot. But at the same moment, she asked why they were all gathered at the table. Her sister stated that their friend wanted to show the beautiful manna stone. At that moment, everyone looked at the young lady with admiration. Ruby stated that her grandmother was an elf, and she always said that when she looked into the stone, she was reflected in it, like in a mirror, and it seemed to her that she could enter the world of fairies. The young lady froze in surprise for a moment. A few minutes later, she told her sister that she would be back soon. At that very moment, she hurried to the library as she wanted to find more information. She understood that it was still possible to get to another world. Yusinil knew she just needed to look over everything again. At that very moment, she opened the story of the angel and the woodcutter. She realized that this was not a simple fairy tale at all. The angel descended into the human world and then returned to heaven. She understood that it definitely spoke of a crossing between spaces. She read about the emerald lake near the mountain, because then the woodcutter saw that he could rise into the sky with the angel. She assumed that they used the reflection in the lake as the manna stone that Ruby held to travel to another world. She understood that if he had such power, then the lake was not ordinary, but a place where a huge amount of manna was collected. She assumed that powerful manna had accumulated in the mountain, but it looked like just a lake. Yusinil understood that if she could only find that place, she would be able to return to her world. But at that very moment, all her thoughts disappeared as she heard a crash behind her. Yusinil turned around in fear and saw the emperor himself. He looked at her intently and said menacingly that he was wounded. He could not believe that she had gone off to the Imperial Library in the middle of an event. He asked if this was all because of her research. He said that today was his birthday, so he asked if she really had to do research on that day. She looked away from him, unable to answer the question. He was furious, because he did not understand why she was avoiding him. And so he asked if she was afraid of him. He asked if she was disgusted by the thought of becoming his empress. She said it wasn't so, but he insisted that if it really wasn't so, then she had to prove it to him. Tesfalin looked intently at his beloved and declared that she must give herself to him. He said that if she could not give him her heart, then she could give him her body. He wanted her to make him feel himself, even just a little. At that very moment, the emperor began to quietly kiss her. The young lady was puzzled, but he was not ready to let her go, so he continued kissing her passionately. After a moment, she finally pushed him away. Yusinil said sheepishly that she couldn't breathe. The emperor, in turn, sighed heavily, looked at her intently, and proposed to marry her. Tesfalin said that he would never interfere with her research, and he could help her. He wanted to work hard to support her. He said that he could give her everything, not just his heart. Tesfalin looked at her intently and asked her to answer him positively. He wanted to betroth himself to her. After asking for forgiveness, the young lady looked away from him as she could not withstand his gaze. At that moment, he turned around and hid his face. He was shaking because she didn't even want to get engaged to him. He was shouting that she was ruthless and he couldn't live peacefully when he wasn't with her. He was asking if she was really going to leave him. The young lady rushed towards him and shouted that she would never do anything like that. She couldn't just leave him. But at that very moment, memories of her past life and her mother came into her head. She was taken aback for a moment. But after a few minutes, she pulled herself together, and hugging her lover, she asked for forgiveness, as she was very sorry. Yusenil asked her lover to wait a little longer. She did not know where to begin her story. She knew that if she told him that her research involved going to another world, he would probably be upset with her. She knew that he would probably feel betrayed. Yusenil, to her regret, realized that she couldn't calm him down, and this made her feel worthless. At that very moment, her sister shouted with a smile that Ruby had given her the mana stone, and even though she had done nothing, it continued to glow. She said that it glowed as if it were alive, and that was amazing. The madam said with a smile that the mana stone was made of diamonds, and they were sometimes used as a light source. The young lady was incredibly surprised. She said that if she were in a dark place and held him, she would not escape from anything. At that very moment, Yusenil realized that the stone could react to mana. As soon as they arrived at the estate, the young lady rushed with the speed of lightning to her laboratory. Her family looked at his trail with surprise, as they did not understand why she ran away. A few minutes later, the young lady opened her small chest of stones and stated that she could use the stones to discover a certain magical power. She was not sure if she was right, but she understood that the poor did not have a choice. Yusenil couldn't put off her research, so she began studying immediately. At that very moment, she sat down to her work, sparing no effort. The next day, a young man entered the office yawning. He looked at his girlfriend in surprise, as he thought she had a day off. She only greeted him with a smile, but she also stated that she knew perfectly well that she had a day off. But she wanted to do some personal research, so she asked him to ignore her. The young man was taken aback, as he understood that she had something serious, but he did not say anything to her. Meanwhile, she was slowly returning home. She told the maid with a smile that she could bring her anything she wanted for dinner. Ganyel hurried to her sister in surprise and asked why she had returned so late, because something amazing had happened to her today, and she was waiting for her sister to tell her everything. Yusenil apologized to her sister and stated that she could not listen to her now and they could talk later. Her sister was upset by what she heard, but she understood everything perfectly. After some time, the young man sighed heavily, as he was tired after a long work. He looked at his girlfriend and declared that they had enough work for today. She sighed and said that he could go home, but she wanted to work a little longer. He didn't know what she was doing so diligently, but he saw that she was working tirelessly. Worthing looked at her with an excited expression and wished her a good evening, and also asked her not to stay too long. She smiled and declared that she would not overwork herself. A moment later, he left, and the young lady was left alone with her research. After some time, they brought her a mountain of letters and told her that in front of her were all the invitations to parties and tea parties, but she asked with a smile to send everyone a polite refusal. The butler was surprised, since there was an invitation from the palace, but she said that it did not matter. Yusenil sighed heavily, as she realized that her lover would be very upset. But she also understood that she didn't have time to think about anything else now, because she wanted to continue working. But she understood that she needed to focus only on her research. Meanwhile, the emperor was finishing his meeting. All those present thanked him for his wise leadership. They saw that he did not make a single mistake. But lately, they saw that he was very strict. A moment later, his assistant presented him with a report. He also reported that the emperor had received a letter from a young lady. The emperor quickly took the letter and asked the man to leave. He opened the letter slowly, as he felt a thrill every time he opened a letter from her. But moments later, he was taken aback, as he saw that she had refused him. He was shocked, because first she had rejected his marriage proposal and invitation to visit, and now she had even avoided meeting him. Some time ago, he asked the butler about the young lady's schedule, but he said that she only went to the research center and returned home late at night. He was worried because she continued. This has been going on for a whole month. He was furious because she went to the center and home every day, leaving no time for him. He wanted to see her at least for a moment, but he understood that it was impossible. He was furious because he knew that the research must be very important to her and more important than him. He remembered asking her to marry him as a child, but then she said that he was not her type. Tesfalin asked who was her type. She said that she liked a man who was taller than her, who could hug her warmly. She said that he should be smart enough to understand what she was saying and carry on a good conversation, and it would be nice if he could use magic and, at the same time, not get tired of regular exercise and be proficient in fencing. He was shocked, as it was unlike him. She said with a smile that the most important thing was appearance, because she was most attracted to guys with black hair. The emperor looked at his reflected face with anger, but at that very moment, he realized that he completely corresponded to the ideal type of his beloved. He knew that with his incredibly handsome face, he would win her heart, because he perfectly matched her preferences. He wanted to see how long she could go without seeing him. A moment later, the young lady finally achieved the desired result. She knew that she would soon succeed. But after a few minutes, her masterpiece broke. Yusinil was shocked because she had put in a lot of work and it was all in vain. She couldn't believe that she had failed again, and she knew it was strange because, in theory, everything was fine. But she didn't know why her theory wasn't working, and she didn't understand what she was doing wrong. A moment later, some young men approached her and anxiously asked her to take a break because she was working hard, and it seemed to them that she was simply punishing herself with such work. Yusenil smiled and stated that she was fine and would take a break as soon as she could, so she asked not to worry about her. They sighed and asked her to take care of herself and her strength. At that moment, the young lady was taken aback, as she heard the wind in the room. She was surprised, as she knew that the window was closed. But a moment later, she saw her lover, who was watching her intently. He greeted her with a smile. Yusinil was puzzled and did not understand how he got to her, but she was worried that others might see him. At that very moment, the emperor jumped down with ease. He sighed and stated that she never had time, and it was the only way he could see her face. He was going to cry and beg for her attention, but seeing her like this, he couldn't complain. She apologized and stated that her research was at a critical point. She asked him to wait a little. He came closer to her and asked if she knew how many times he had already thought about this. He asked her to just look at him as he missed her. She sighed heavily and called his name softly, but he noticed that she was exhausted. Tesfalin shouted and stated that she herself told him to take care of his health, but it seemed that she herself did not follow her own advice. He asked what she was doing because he saw that she worked a lot at her desk. Yusinil stated that she was working on a magical tool that could later be used to locate the place. He also realized how exactly she used the mana stones. He noticed that the flow of mana seemed unstable. At that very moment, the emperor applied his force to the stone. A few minutes later, the young lady looked in surprise at the compass he had fixed. She couldn't understand how he had managed to do such a thing. He smiled and said that it was useful in some matters. At that very moment, she heard a noise outside the door and asked her lover to leave before someone noticed him. As he left, he looked at her with a smile and asked her not to overwork herself. Yusinil smiled and stated that she would contact him soon. That same evening, she was finishing the last details of her compass. After some time, she finally managed to create a fully functional compass. She knew that in front of her now was the compass, which would lead her to the Emerald Pond. Countless people set foot on the mountain. Mages and adventurers went there to search, but only a few of them returned. They disappeared without a trace, and only the lists of the missing continued to grow. The mountain was said to be a place that swallowed up explorers, and those who went there never returned. She couldn't believe that so many people had just disappeared, so she knew that if she wasn't careful, the same thing could happen to her. But she knew she had gone too far and she couldn't stop now. After some time, the young lady came to the research center. After asking for forgiveness, she stated that she was applying for leave. She looked intently at the young man and, introducing herself, stated that she was a researcher at the institute. The young people were extremely surprised that she was leaving, and they said that they would miss her very much. She thanked them with a smile for their kind words, and also asked them to take care of themselves. Moments later, she turned around as she saw her mentor. He looked at her menacingly and asked if she had really gone on vacation without even consulting her professor. Yusunil apologized for not telling him sooner, as she had made the decision very quickly. But she stated that she was leaving to focus on her research, and the fastest way for her to learn was to experience everything for herself. He was taken aback and asked in surprise if this meant that she was really going up the mountain. He was shocked by her statement and shouted that she simply could not go there alone because it was very dangerous there. Yusunil said with a smile that she was well aware of the danger, but still, she hoped that he would at least bless her. She said that she thought it would help her on her journey. The young man froze in place in shock, as he did not expect such a thing. But a moment later, he sighed heavily and declared that he could not stop her if she had already made her decision. And at the same time, he already knew better than anyone how much effort she had put into her research. At that very moment, the young lady extended her hand to him, and he looked at her in surprise. Yusunil thanked him for everything, because without his help, she would never have been able to achieve such success. He shook her hand with a smile and asked her to be careful. He stated that he knew that she would be worried, so she should take care of herself. Finally, the young lady said with a smile that she would do everything in her power, so he should not worry. She smiled and said goodbye to him. He stared at her for a while, not wanting to let her go. He knew his office would be empty without her, but he knew he couldn't stop her. After some time, she told her friends that she was leaving, and they looked at her with no less surprise and asked where exactly she was going. Yusunil smiled and stated that it was related to her research, and she had to go to one place if she wanted to learn more, so she assumed that they wouldn't be able to see each other for a while. Yusunil said with a smile that if they decided to get married, they should just have a wedding. She said that they should not give up on it because of her. At that very moment, the young lady said that this would not happen, but her beloved declared that he agreed. They looked at each other in surprise. While their friend looked at them with a smile, after a moment, they still wished her a good journey and, most importantly, a safe one. That evening, the young lady met her parents and announced her trip. Madam asked excitedly about her return. She wanted to know how long her daughter would be busy with work. At that moment, the Duke cried out, as he did not want to allow his daughter to go on a dangerous journey. He shouted that if he knew she would return safe and sound, he could wait as long as she wanted. He understood that she was leaving without any guarantees, and therefore he was worried that something might happen to her. The lady told her husband that their daughter had made this decision, and as parents, they should believe her. She said that he had previously said that he would support his daughter, whatever her decision was. She understood that this was a necessary choice for her. Madam said that if her family tried to stop her, it would be hard for her. Yusunil, in turn, quietly listened to her parents, but she still understood that they would let her go, no matter how difficult this decision might be for them. But she was sad because she understood that she had the most difficult moment left. After some time, she met her lover, and he greeted her with a smile. He said with a smile that she must have had some free time since she wanted to meet in the greenhouse. He asked if she really wanted to spend time with him and look at the flowers. He said that he always looked after the flowers so she could admire them every day. Yusunil looked at her lover with sadness and said that she had to tell him something. He looked at her in surprise and asked what had happened because he saw that she was serious. She sighed and announced that she was leaving. Tesfalun, taken aback, asked what she was talking about, but at that very moment he remembered the compass and realized that she had finished working on it. He was furious because he had not helped her so that she would leave. Tesfalun shouted to his beloved that she could take him with her and they could leave together. She asked for forgiveness because she could not do such a thing. He was shocked and did not understand why she refused. Looking away from him, she stated that this journey was something she had to go through, to correct herself alone, and she couldn't drag him into it. Tesfalun asked, trembling, what he should do when she left, for she meant the world to him. The young lady slowly approached her lover and quietly called him. She looked at him intently and stated that he should listen to her very carefully because she had told him a secret. She sighed and stated that she remembered her past life. He was taken aback because he did not understand what was being discussed. She said she was different from everyone else because of her memories. For this reason, she continued to study magic in order to meet her mother from her past life. After all, her mother was the whole world to her. But in the end, she suddenly passed away without even saying goodbye to her. Yusinil said she left her mother alone, and she felt guilty ever since. The emperor was taken aback and looked at her with tears in his eyes. She said that this does not mean that this life is not important to her. She said that the new life is very dear to her, because she decided that she would return no matter what happened. She understood that if she managed to get into her past world, then she would return. But unfortunately, she didn't know how long it would take. And so she asked him to wait for her because she wanted to come back to him, and when she came back, they could get married and live together. With tears in her eyes, Yusinil said with a smile that back then, they could just wake up next to each other and start the day together. She wanted to spend every day and every free time with him. She wanted to live a full life next to him. At that very moment, the emperor pulled away from her and quietly called her by name. He understood that he couldn't just let her go and wanted to enjoy her to the fullest. She pushed him away and asked him to wait a bit. Looking away with embarrassment, she stated that it was too fast. She wanted them to slow down a little, and he agreed with her and said that he loved her, and she said that she loved him too. The next day, the young lady was ready to leave. She turned around because she heard sister ask when she would be back. Daniel, with tears in her eyes, said that she would be sad without her. Yusinil said with a smile that if her sister behaved well, she would return soon. Yusinil told her sister to eat well and not forget to do her homework. The madam wished her daughter a safe journey with a smile. She said that they would be waiting for her all the time. Meanwhile, the duke could not bear it and burst into tears in front of his daughter. He could not just let her go. Yusinil looked tenderly at her family, and after a moment, declared that it was time for her to go. Without a moment's delay, she saddled her horse and at that very moment left her family and rode off to meet the unknown. Madame looked at her daughter with a smile, while her relatives were filled with bitter tears. After a few minutes, the young lady stopped because she saw a familiar silhouette in the distance. Tesfalin looked at his beloved with a tender smile and called her. He said with a smile that he had come to take her to the northern gate, as he had promised. At that very moment, the young lady declared that she would like to return something to him, because she thought that she should not keep his valuable gift any longer. Tesfalin hugged his beloved tightly and declared that she should take the gift with her. She was taken aback and asked if he knew what it was. He declared that it was his heart, which she could take with her. He knew that if she returned safe and sound, nothing would happen. She knew that there might be a situation where she wouldn't come back, but he said that she would definitely come back. He said he knew she would come back to him, so she could take his heart with her. She sighed heavily, as she understood that she would not be able to convince him otherwise, so she declared that she would return safe and sound. Tesfalin kissed her tenderly and declared that she should not forget that she had promised to marry him when she returned. She said with a smile that she would never forget it. Tesfalin looked tenderly at his beloved and wished her a safe journey. She smiled back at him and thanked him and said goodbye. After some time, the young man stood alone and watched his beloved walk away. After she said goodbye to everyone, she continued her journey. She couldn't look back because she didn't want to regret her decision. For this reason, she simply rushed on without looking back. But at the same time, she made small stops. After some time, she said goodbye to her horse, which had taken her to her destination. A few minutes later, she felt manna floating in the air. She turned around and looked at the mountain, as she knew it was no ordinary mountain. After several days of traveling, she finally arrived at the mountain. Yusinil sighed as she realized that the mountain was indeed difficult to climb. But moments later, she was taken aback as she saw the landmark she had set yesterday. She was shocked because she realized that she was walking in circles again. Even though she followed the direction indicated, she still returned to the same place. Yusinil suggested that it was as if the mountain itself was changing its path. But still, the young lady was not going to give up so easily, so she wanted to try again. She understood that no matter how many obstacles she encountered on her way, she would still not lose her determination. She didn't know how long she would wander in this state, but she still wasn't going to give up. Yusinil had been on the mountain for a whole week. In turn, she realized that she was moving forward. Yusinil looked around and wondered if she should set up camp, but a moment later, she saw that the compass light was different from before, so she needed to go further. A few minutes into the journey, she froze in place, realizing that she had overcome all the difficulties. She was incredibly happy when she came across the lake, because she was finally able to find the Emerald Pond. In her joy, she guessed that it had taken her a whole week to find a place. Yusinil looked at the lake in surprise as she realized that it was filled with mana. She simply could not believe that such a place existed, as it seemed to her that it was a dream. But moments later, she looked closely at her reflection. Some time ago, Madame spoke about her daughter, that since she had discovered all the answers for herself, up to this point she could tell her everything, namely, how to get into the world of fairies, even if she was not a fairy. Yusinil asked her mother in surprise how she could get into the fairy world, and Madame declared that the answer was in her blood. After all, the power of the elves is contained in her blood. With her help, she will be able to pass into that world. The lady screamed that she does not understand at all what her mother means. But moments later, she was taken aback as she saw her mother's hands, which were black. Madame told her daughter that she should never forget what she really wanted and where she ultimately wanted to go. But the mother asked her daughter to be careful. At that very moment, the young lady thought about her mother's words, and a moment later, she took a small blade and cut her hand. After all the manipulations, she saw how the lake began to boil. She was in shock and did not understand what was happening at all, as the entire pond was seething and drawing her in. A moment later, she was already drowning in the lake. The young lady could not breathe, but she knew that she must not lose consciousness. After some time, she opened her eyes and was taken aback, as her head hurt, but she did not know where she was. The little inhabitants of the new world greeted her with a smile and welcomed her to the magical world. She asked in surprise if they knew who she was, and they said that of course they knew, since they were the ones who had brought her and they were waiting to greet her. At that very moment, she was informed that the queen was waiting for her and she should follow them. Looking around, the young lady noticed that she had entered a wonderful world. They said that it was all because their world was magical and filled with happiness. They said that in this world, one could get rid of all sorrows, and they also noted that it would be good if she could find peace in their world. The fairy looked closely at the young lady and stated that she felt that she was worried, and in that case, she could stay in their world and gradually think everything over. But the young lady stated that she did not have time. She needed to hurry. They said that in their world, she would find true peace. At the same time, they suggested that perhaps what she was looking for was right here. Yusinil looked in surprise at the beautiful butterflies that were flying next to the flowers. She understood that if paradise existed, then it probably looked exactly like this. They happily said that the butterfly liked her and pulled her onto her hand. Being in such a beautiful world, it seemed to her that all the tension she was experiencing had evaporated. It seemed to her that all her stress was melting before her eyes. Yusinil really wanted to get rid of the disturbing nightmares of her past life, so she assumed that it was in a place like this that she could get rid of the pain and feel freedom and peace. But unfortunately, she knew that she could not stop. And releasing the butterfly, she asked her new acquaintances with a smile to take her to the queen. She knew that she had to go through her own path. For a while, the young lady said goodbye to her new friends with a smile. Without wasting a single minute, Yusinil went to the mountain to see the queen. After some time, she finally climbed the mountain and saw the queen. Yusinil looked at the madam and asked if it was the queen in front of her. She replied that it was so, and at the same time noticed that the young lady had come a long way. The queen stared at the young lady for a moment, but at that very moment she said that she felt negative energy emanating from her. Yusinil assumed it was because of her human blood, as she was half elf, half human. At that very moment, the queen declared that this was not what she meant. She was talking about the thing the young lady wore around her neck, and she said that she distinctly felt an evil force emanating from it. Yusinil was taken aback as she realized that the queen was talking about her lover's heart. The queen stated that this energy threatened to destroy her destiny, but her elven blood had protected her until now. The queen told the young lady that no matter what path she chose, her soul and fate would follow her. The girl stated that she came for only one reason, because she wanted to know how she could pass to another world. She asked the queen to help her with this. The queen said that there was one way, and this place was a kind of mirror that reflected and connected the dimension. Yusinil happily asked if she could use it to cross over to another world, and the queen said that it was true, since the one who enforced the rules of the world had told her to let her through. The young lady looked at her in surprise, not understanding what she was talking about, but the queen stated that she was talking about the snow dragon, Khaleesi. At that very moment, she remembered the man she had met in the temple. She remembered that it was he who helped her in her search for information. The queen stated that it was he who allowed her to go on the journey, and he was probably watching them right now. At that very moment, the queen told the young lady that she must follow her. A few minutes later, Yusanil followed the queen without question. The queen stated that she could use the mirror to get to the world she wanted. But there was one condition. The queen declared that the young lady must possess something from the other world, no matter what it was or whether it was visible or not. Yusanil was taken aback, as she did not expect to hear such a thing. She understood that she was reincarnated, so she had nothing from her past life. But she still had many memories from her past life. She understood that her soul still belonged to that world. At that moment, Yusanil looked at the queen and stated that she already had something. The queen looked at her with a smile and stated that in that case, she could pass through the mirror. The queen said that it would allow her to travel to any time and place she wished. But she had to be careful. She had to focus on one place where she wanted to go, and if she got distracted or confused, she would wander forever. The queen told the young lady that she should never stop and should only go straight to her destination. A moment later, the queen wished the young lady a safe journey, and she entered the mirror. There was only complete darkness in the mirror, and she could not see where she was going, or even see her hand in front of her face. She had no idea how far she had gone, or how much time had passed. All she could do was think about the people she missed and keep moving forward. But a moment later, the young lady was taken aback as a hole appeared in the midnight sky. She was in shock as she was falling. Yusanil, in turn, landed on the ground with ease. But at that very moment, she looked around as if she did not understand where she was. But after a few seconds, she realized that after a long journey, she found herself in front of an urn, and in it were her ashes from a past life. For a while, she looked as if enchanted at the small urn, where photographs were visible nearby. She saw the name she had in her past life, and in that moment, she realized that inside the urn were her remains. Yusanil sighed heavily and wondered how her mother had felt after she left. She closed her eyes and heard her own heartbeat, but she hoped that her mother would not be too sad. To her regret, she could not bear it and burst into tears. She silently asked her mother for forgiveness for abandoning her, for leaving her completely alone. She understood that she had been a terrible daughter. Yusanil screamed as she desperately wanted to see her mother, even if only for a moment. At that moment, she looked away because she heard some noise. Madame, with a smile, asked the lady for forgiveness if she had frightened her. At that very moment, Madame handed the handkerchief to the young lady. Yusanil froze in shock as she saw her mother in front of her. Without hesitation, she rushed to her mother and hugged her tightly. But at the same time, Madame announced with surprise that the young lady was mistaken. Yusanil, bursting into tears, told her mother that it was her, because they bought the scarf there when they were on vacation. She told her mother that it was hers now, but she had bought it for her birthday when she was still in high school. She said that she wanted to buy her a new one because this scarf was already very old. But then something irreparable happened to her. The madam looked at the young lady in surprise and asked if she was really her daughter. Yusanil told her mother that she really missed her very much. The madam was shocked and did not understand how her daughter could be in front of her in the body of another person, but the lady only stated that she was reborn in another world. Yusanil smiled and told her mother that she had returned to tell her that she did not need to worry because everything was fine with her. Madame asked her daughter if she would stay with her. Yusanil asked her mother for forgiveness and stated that she could not stay in this world for long. She turned around, looked at the gate, and stated that unfortunately, she didn't have much time left. At that very moment, she said that she had something for her mother. She gave her a whole mountain of jewels and told her mother that in the new world, she was living well and richly. So she wanted her mother not to worry and to live a happy life. She told her mother that she would always think of her. Madame wanted her daughter to stay, but the young lady only told her mother that she loved her very much and thanked her for giving birth to her. Madame froze for a moment with tears in her eyes. She looked intently at her daughter and at the same time did not forget to thank her for being born her daughter. She thanked her daughter for coming back and finding her like this. With tears in her eyes, she said that she would always love her. Yusanil looked at her mother with a smile and said goodbye to her. The madam shouted to her daughter to be healthy and happy. Yusanil responded by shouting at her mother that she should be happy every day. She wanted her mother to live without regrets. But after a few minutes, her gates closed, and she was left alone in the darkness. At that moment, she looked at her lover's heart in surprise, as she felt a vibration as if he was trying to comfort her. She was in complete darkness, but strangely enough, she could feel his presence. She felt which way she needed to go. She saw a light that showed her the way. She understood that she had to get to the place where her loved ones were. So she returned to the Northern Empire, along a certain path. After some time, the young lady swam out. She looked around slowly and realized that she was on the mountain again. At that very moment, she realized that she had returned. She realized that everything happened too fast compared to the amount of time and effort she had put in to get back, and it was an incredibly short time. But that moment made her truly happy. She remembered the look on her mother's face, who I said would always love her. Now, Yusinil understood perfectly well that she could let go of her past life and live a new life. After that, she walked along the path she remembered and quietly descended the mountain, although she walked slowly because she did not have her former horse, but her steps seemed much lighter. After some time, Yusinil saw that winter had already arrived. She wanted to know how many days had passed since all the leaves had fallen from the trees. Yusinil saw her home in the distance and felt a sense of relief at the same time. But all her feelings disappeared in the blink of an eye, as she was informed that she could not get around. The knight said that this was not a place where one could just come and go whenever one wanted. He said that she could return to where she came from. He said that no matter how much she insisted on coming in, she had to leave this place immediately. A moment later, the coachman stopped near them and asked with bewilderment what all the fuss was about near the gate. Yusinil, without wasting a minute, called the man. He flinched when he saw the young lady. At that very moment, he shouted to the Duke to come out at once, as the young lady had returned. At that very moment, he looked at his daughter with tears in his eyes, because she really was in front of him. The Duke got out of the carriage and asked in surprise if this was true. At that very moment, he saw his daughter, and tears appeared in his eyes. He quickly rushed to her and asked if it was really her. He said that he simply could not believe what he saw. She noticed that he had aged while she was gone. At that very moment, the young lady heard the voice of her sister, who greeted her with joy. After some time, the maid said that she would make her some tea, and the young lady felt awkward because there were many servants in her house whom she did not know. The madam happily called her daughter. She was glad that her daughter had returned home to the nest. She quickly hugged her and greeted her happily, beaming with happiness as her daughter returned safe and sound. After some time, they were all happily drinking tea and having a casual conversation. But a moment later, she was informed that 3 years had passed since she left. The young lady was surprised by this, because for her, only a few weeks had passed. The Duke, with tears in his eyes, told his daughter that they had been waiting for her for a long time. Ganyel smiled and told her sister that the house felt empty without her, and they were glad she was finally back. Yusinil, in turn, now understood why her sister had grown so much. Yusinil saw that her family treated her the same way they had before, even though they hadn't seen her for several years. At that very moment, she felt that she had truly returned home. She understood that she needed to let go of the past and move forward for the sake of the people who loved her and believed in her. Without wasting time, she hurried to her lover. She was sure that her lover was waiting for her, and she knew that he would be glad when he saw that she had returned. And when she saw him this time, she would tell him how much she loved him. She wanted to say that she would always be there for him. She wanted to tell him that she had been bored all this time, so she hurriedly approached the imperial palace. A moment later, the emperor met her with a joyful smile on his face. Yusinil said with a smile that she knew very well that he had been waiting for her for a long time, but now she had returned to him. She said that she had heard that several years had passed, but now she wanted to know how he had lived all this time. But at that very moment, the emperor froze in place from shock. He did not understand how this was possible. She looked at him in surprise, not understanding what had happened because he had turned completely pale. Yusinil asked in bewilderment why he covered his mouth with his hand. She wanted to know if he really felt unwell, but as soon as she approached him, he felt a tremor throughout his body. And at that very moment, he turned around and hurried back to the palace. The knights looked at the emperor in surprise, as they did not expect such a thing. Tesfalin turned around and glanced sideways at the young lady, but at the same moment, he hastily shouted to the knights to open the gates immediately, while he slammed the doors in front of his beloved's nose. At that moment, she froze in shock, not understanding what had happened at all. She was surprised that he simply ran away from her, and at the same time, she realized that he looked as if, at that moment of their meeting, he saw a monster. She didn't understand what had happened and why he had reacted that way to her appearance. She wondered if she had done something wrong. After some time, she finally returned home and was greeted with joy, and her family threw her a gala party. Yuseniel looked at them in surprise, as she had not expected anything like this at all. Her family said they had decided to throw her a party to celebrate her return. Madame said everyone in the mansion had helped prepare for the small celebration. A moment later, the young lady looked at the festive table in surprise, as she did not expect such a thing. A moment later, the knight apologized to the young lady for his rude behavior, as he did not know who she really was, but he congratulated her on her return, and the butlers, with tears in their eyes, said that they were very glad that she had returned, because they missed her very much. She was touched by their words and tenderly thanked them for such words. Sometime after the party, the young lady lay in her bed, as she had eaten very much. But at the same time, she was touched by all the words and actions of her relatives. She understood that for them, several years lasted a very long time. But for her, they flew by like a few weeks. Yuseniel understood perfectly well that a lot had changed during this time. At the same time, she wondered what had happened to her lover while she was gone. After some time, the young lady began writing a letter. She knew that for her it was a short time, but for him it was several years. While she thought about how he must have suffered for so long waiting for her, she began to write him a letter with a sincere apology. She wanted him to know how sorry she was and how much she missed him. The next day, the young lady looked at the young man in surprise and asked if he was holding the letters that had arrived today. He said that he was. She asked with a smile if there was anything from the palace. He sighed and stated that there were no such letters. Yuseniel sighed heavily, as she was upset by this news. But a moment later, the young man announced that the letters contained a letter from the Marquise. After some time, the young league player met her old friend. Orin was surprised and asked her friend what had happened, as they had not seen each other for a long time. She said with a smile that her research had taken much longer than she had expected. Her friend said that she had missed her very much, and she asked if her friend had been hurt. Orin sighed and told her friend that while she was gone, a lot had happened in the palace, and a year after her departure, the emperor began to change greatly. She said he was cool and calm at work, but often became emotional and unstable. However, there were many occasions when he raised his voice during meetings, and he was more ruthless in his decisions than before. She heard that he began to go out onto the balcony often. He could stand there for hours in a daze, and then he would return back. She sighed and stated that in her absence, he had been restless and had not been easy. The men hurriedly looked through the letters and documents, as they wanted to take them to the emperor as quickly as possible, since too many had accumulated over all this time. Meanwhile, the man called his wife in surprise, because a strange letter had arrived along with the document. Madame looked at the letter in surprise, as she realized what was written there. Meanwhile, the young lady, smiling, was getting her sister ready for a walk. After some time, they visited a small shop and happily looked at the cute toys. Yuseniel froze in place when she heard people whispering that she couldn't help herself, and they heard that the letter was incredibly sad. They were told that it was more heartbreaking than the tragic letters. They discussed her family. Meanwhile, the young people said that it seemed like she had thrown away all her pride and dignity. They simply could not believe that she had been bewitched by the emperor. The young lady looked at her sister in surprise and asked if she was okay. Yuseniel was in shock and did not understand what was going on. Yuseniel smiled and told her sister that everything was fine, and at the same moment she suggested that she look into other stores. Yuseniel didn't understand how such gossip could spread so quickly. After some time, all the ladies were discussing the fact that Yuseniel had sent a heartbreaking letter to the emperor. They said that she had been writing to him for some time, but he was so irritated that he simply threw the letters away. At the same time, the servant was told that she not only wrote him letters, but also came to his palace. But he simply sent her away. They said she had lost her pride and dignity. At the same time, the young lady was furious, because wherever she went, people whispered and criticized her. Yuseniel understood perfectly well that the rumors were becoming bolder and more vicious every day, and eventually turned into ridicule of her family. After some time, the young lady finally invited all her relatives to the meeting, as she needed to tell them something. She sighed and stated that she was sure they had already heard all the rumors about her. Her family did not answer, but the Duke, in turn, could not stand it and shouted that she did not need to worry because he would never believe the poisonous gossip. He shouted that she should simply ignore them. Madame looked at her daughter and stated that she had heard everyone talking about her sending letters to the emperor, and rumors were spreading that she was aiming for the post of empress. She looked closely at her daughter and asked her if she knew why people said such things about her. She sighed and stated that she and the emperor were lovers. At that moment, everyone present was taken aback, as they did not expect to hear anything like this. She sighed and stated that it was true, and that this was the case until she left. Yusinil sighed and stated that when she saw him for the first time in years, he didn't say anything and just ran away as soon as he saw her. And since then, there was only silence from him. She couldn't understand why he did that, so she sent him a letter to get an answer. Shedding bitter tears, she said that she did not know that their contents would become public knowledge and cause an explosion of rumors. She said that she was very ashamed in front of her family, and she did not want her family to be dragged into a scandal because of her. At that very moment, all her relatives came to her and said that they did not know that she had been coping with everything alone. The Duke looked at his daughter with a tender smile and declared that, whatever the reason for his change, she should value herself more. The lady, with a smile, said that she agreed with her husband. She wanted her daughter to go through something similar and start loving herself again. She said that it was not her fault and she should not blame herself. Her sister said with tears in her eyes that she didn't want her to be hurt again because she was their most beloved person in the world. Yusinil, with tears in her eyes, thanked her family for their kind words. This was the first time she cried in front of her family. All she could think about was leaving. She withdrew into herself and kept her distance from everyone, trying to cope with everything alone. But now she realized that she had a family who always took care of her. Now she understood which path she had to take. But she knew for sure that wherever she went and whatever she did, she would not be alone. She sent many requests to visit the palace, but she always received the same answer, and she was puzzled, since the answer was the same as the previous one. She was furious and did not understand what the emperor was doing and why he was behaving this way. She thought that he had already heard the rumors that had been circulating in the capital for a long time. So she wanted to know why he had been silent all this time. She wanted to know what exactly he was thinking about. But at the palace gates, she was met by knights who told her that she could not enter until she introduced herself. When she took off her hood, the knights were taken aback because they recognized her. At that very moment, she declared that she was the Duke's eldest daughter, and without wasting a minute, she introduced herself. Yusinil looked intently at everyone present and declared that she had come to see the emperor. For some time, she was allowed into the imperial palace, but before leaving for the emperor's office, she was told that he was busy with a very important matter, so they could not let her through. She said that since he was inside, she would wait until he was free, but she was assured that he had several important things to do, so they would not be able to meet. She stated that it would take a little time. The man sighed heavily and said that he had already told her several times that the emperor would not receive her during the day, so she had to leave. She was furious and insisted on being let in, but the knight declared that the emperor had no intention of meeting her. Yusinil was puzzled by what she heard, but at the same time, she understood that she could not do anything about it. She knew he wasn't going to date her, so she didn't want to hold out any hope anymore. She realized her feelings for him were over. As she left, she mentally said goodbye to her lover. Meanwhile, the emperor watched intently as she left the palace. He saw and felt her pain and disappointment. He felt her despair and sadness, and he also felt relief, and he understood that this simply could not be. He assured himself that this was not true at all. At that moment, he remembered their meeting and how she said that several years had already passed. He was shocked then and did not understand why he could see something like that. He didn't understand why he saw her soul, because this was the first time something like this had happened. As he watched her walk away, all he wanted in that moment was to rush towards her and stop her. He wanted her not to leave. Tesfalin wanted to shout these words after her, but in turn, he bit his lips and remained silent, because he knew how important this journey was for her. He knew that she would have reached it no matter what. But at the same time, he knew that he would wait for her, no matter what, because she promised him that they would be together. He knew that she would stay with him forever when she returned from her journey. After some time, all the guests greeted the emperor. At the same time, they did not forget to praise him. He understood that he was the emperor who ruled the Northern Empire, but he knew that if he ever doubted, the empire would be in danger. After some time, the men greeted the emperor. They said that under his reign, their land prospered, and they were enchanted and at the same time admired his unprecedented wisdom and determination. He knew he had to defend his position until she returned, no matter what. Sometime later, the emperor was sitting in his office and sorting through a whole mountain of documents. But after a few minutes, he saw that it had started to snow. He wanted to know if the place she went to was the same as their empire. He wanted to see her as soon as possible. Tesfalun missed his beloved very much and was eagerly awaiting her return. After some time, he declared the meeting closed. But his subjects assured him that he was too harsh, and they wanted him to reconsider his decision. He left, and they shouted after him to think about everything again. Tesfalun turned around and asked angrily how they dared to say such a thing to him. He was furious because they were questioning his decision. He stated that it seemed they were trying to destroy order in the empire. Everyone present was taken aback and stated that they had meant nothing of the sort. A moment later, he closed the doors in front of them and went about his business. He was furious and felt himself becoming more and more nervous. Everything around him irritated him, and even the smallest little things bothered him. At the same time, these expectations were endlessly painful for him. A moment later, he was taken aback as the young ladies approached him and declared that he was the star of the banquet and that he should not be alone. They said that the citizens of the empire would be incredibly saddened by this fact. At the same time, the ladies wanted to know why he was drinking alone. They said that if he didn't mind, they could stay with him. They said they would be happy to give the emperor an unforgettable experience on his special day. He listened to their words with anger, but after a moment, he could not stand it any longer and ordered them to be silent. He looked closely at the girls and said that the hypocrisy with which they spoke irritated his ears. The young ladies were taken aback and apologized for disturbing him. He was puzzled because several years had passed since his beloved left. His anxiety and worry were growing stronger every day. He was shocked because he did not understand why she had not returned yet. He did not know how long he had to wait for her. He wondered how long she wanted him to wait for her, so with tears in his eyes he called for his beloved, but it was all in vain. At the same time, the demon asked the emperor with a grin if he still believed that the young lady would return to him. He was taken aback when he heard the devil's voice. The demon said that deep down he knew perfectly well that she would never return to him because she had abandoned him. The emperor could not stand it and began to rub everything around him in anger. He wanted the demon to remain silent forever. He was furious and didn't know how he dared to say such a thing when he knew nothing about her. It was true that he had doubts because of the devil's words, but after such a long wait, it finally happened, and he felt her energy in the empire again. Then he rushed towards her without looking back. At that moment, his whole body was filled with joy. He felt it and was sure that she had returned to him. So, with a joyful smile, the emperor ran out to meet her. However, the person who returned to him was not the Usanil he once knew, and this fact shocked him, and he didn't know what to do. When he was little, he ran away from everyone in the imperial palace without looking back, and everyone was confused. They did not understand where he was going. But he, in turn, did not understand why they looked like that. He didn't understand why everyone around him was full of lies and contempt. But a moment later, he saw his girlfriend, who was standing calmly in the palace. He understood that he was safe with her because she was his beloved. Tesfalun joyfully rushed to his friend, and at the same time he called her, he knew that she was not like them because he did not see her. But at that very moment, she turned around and he saw her face. He froze in place when she reached out to him. At that very moment, she announced with a smile that she had returned to him. And at the same time, she said that she had missed him very much. A few minutes later, he woke up from a terrible nightmare. He sighed heavily as he realized he had just had a nightmare. The emperor knew that several days had already passed since the day she left the palace, and he watched her leave, unable to do anything. Meanwhile, the maid looked at her mistress in surprise and asked if she really wanted to throw away all the things. Usanil stated that this was so, and at the same time, she asked the maid to take them all out into the street. Usanil knew that several years had passed, but even the paper smelled different to her. A moment later, she saw the vase in which the flower had previously been. She picked it up, but the flower quickly withered, and for this reason, her lover planted flowers in the greenhouse. At that very moment, she threw all her thoughts away. Because she did not want to think about her lover, she sighed heavily, because she had previously ordered herself not to think about him. Usanil decided to take her mind off her thoughts a little, so she visited her friends. At this, her old friend greeted her with joy. He asked what she had been researching for so long. He said that she had to let them know how she was doing despite being so busy. Usanil said with a smile that she had already finished everything and was now back for good. After some time, the young people happily communicated with each other. Yusunil looked at her friends with joy, as she was glad that they were together again. Yusunil asked her friend if he was still busy training knights. He smiled and stated that he was, and that they had many new students, so things were quite busy, but it still brought him pleasure. He also asked the Marquise how she was doing. She said with a smile that she was doing well and had no reason to worry. He sighed with a smile as he felt relieved. Yusunil asked with a smile if they were going to switch to a more friendly tone soon, since they had been communicating with each other formally all this time. The Marquise stated that the Lord was a very serious person, so she naturally became like him. The Lord said with a smile that she was the person who observed etiquette the most, so he had no choice but to do the same. Yusunil looked at her friends with a smile, because she understood that they had not changed at all. At the same time, Ruby was practicing fencing with her friend, but she was losing. Ruby admitted her defeat with a smile, but stated that she never thought there would be such a big difference between them. Ganyul told her friend that she was just lucky, and her friend was also very good at fencing. Moments later, she turned around because she saw her sister. Ganyul smiled and told her sister that she would protect her from now on, so she didn't have to worry in vain. Sometime later, the young league received an invitation to a New Year's ball, but her family assured her that if she didn't want to go, she could just stay home. She said with a smile that they didn't need to worry and that she really didn't care about such rumors. She knew that this time it was different, and she was going to the appointment for herself, not for anyone else. Although some time had passed before the day of the reception, and as soon as the young lady entered the hall, everyone began to whisper, for they had heard that she had seduced the emperor, but he had rejected her. They were shocked because she tried to pretend like nothing happened. At the same time, everyone present noticed that she was truly beautiful and refined. It hadn't been more than a few minutes since she entered the hall, and a young man immediately called her. He looked at her with a smile and asked if she would spare him some time for a dance. She smiled and thanked him for the invitation, but stated that she would like to walk around the room for a while. He sighed, feeling disappointed. Meanwhile, the emperor looked intently at his beloved. He couldn't take his gaze off her, but at the same time, he saw her disappear into the crowd. All this time, he missed her very much and understood that he should be happy because he saw her bright smile. But he was puzzled and did not understand why his heart hurt so much. The emperor could not bear it and rushed onto the terrace. He felt bad about everything that was happening, but he did not understand why she behaved this way. He did not understand why she looked different before. After some time, the man informed the emperor that the scouts had informed them that the demons had begun to be active again and that they needed to move forward immediately. He asked the emperor when they would hold a council on this matter. The emperor did not answer his subordinate, but after a few minutes of reflection, he asked the man to wait a little outside. Tesfalin was puzzled, as he could not concentrate on anything. The only thing that occupied his thoughts was his beloved. After a few minutes, he decided to take a little walk, but at that very moment, he stopped, because he heard the whispers of the maids who were talking to his beloved, and that she had fallen on her knees and cried in front of him, and at the same time, she was saying that he should look at her. They said that after this outburst, her family's reputation was ruined. They knew that the Duke's financial situation was not so bad, but they did not understand why she behaved so desperately, while they said that, most likely, she just wanted to become empress. At that moment, the emperor looked at them menacingly and asked what they were talking about. The young maids started, as they did not expect to see him. But at that very moment, he shouted angrily and asked who had spread such absurd rumors. He asked angrily from whom they had heard such things. After some time, the emperor saw a letter that was addressed to him, but unfortunately, this letter went to the wrong address, and for this reason, such rumors spread. Tesfalin ran away because he was scared and couldn't accept that she had changed. But now, after reading the letter, he understood that she was still the same. He understood that it was he who had changed. He was furious with himself because he realized that it was he who had turned away from her. The young lady turned around as she heard someone calling her. Turning around, she saw her old friend. He greeted her with a smile, as they had not seen each other for a long time. After a few minutes of conversation, he noticed that she was the same. She stated that he also remained the same. He asked when she planned to return to the academy. She didn't know the answer to his question, but he stated that she could return at any time, and the young lady was extremely surprised to hear something like that. He said with a smile that she could come back whenever she wanted to see her place, so it remained unoccupied. She was glad to hear something like that. A moment later, the young lady announced with a smile that this composition was her favorite. And without a moment's hesitation, the professor extended his hand to her. He asked with a smile if she would do him the honor of dancing with him. He stated that she might, but he also noted that such an opportunity was extremely rare. Yuseniel agreed to his proposal with a smile. A few minutes later, the young people were shining on the dance floor. At the same time, everyone looked at them intently, as they were dazzling. The young ladies said that the young people looked like the main characters of the play. Worthing the Strong said that she danced well. The young lady smiled and said that it was all thanks to him, because he led her well. But unfortunately, their dance did not last long, as the emperor suddenly intervened. Yuseniel was shocked by this, and at that very moment, everyone turned their attention to them, as they had not expected anything like this. At that very moment, the emperor told his companion that he had something to tell her. He said he was wrong and he was very sorry, so he hoped she would forgive him. But to his surprise, Yuseniel didn't answer him. After a moment, she still said that she did not understand why he was asking her forgiveness. She said that she had no reason to forgive him. The emperor was taken aback and immediately grabbed her hand, as he intended to speak with her in a more private setting. After a few minutes, they finally came out into the corridor, but the young lady took her hand back and stated that he should let go of her immediately. She looked at him menacingly and said that he could not just drag her along with him. She asked if he understood the situation this put her in. At that very moment, throwing aside all his pride, he knelt before her and asked for forgiveness. The emperor said that he was wrong and it was all his fault. He begged her for forgiveness, standing on his knees. Yuseniel sighed and stated that he had settled in well, since all he had to do was apologize. He was taken aback and looked at her in surprise. She looked at him with fury and asked if he knew what people were talking about just now. They were talking and calling her an abandoned one, whom the emperor simply used and threw away. She spoke with fury that it was because of him that she was expelled from the empire. Now, people were pointing fingers at her again because of him. She said that since he was the emperor, he could pretend he didn't know anything and just apologize to her. She asked angrily why her family had to go through something like this. The emperor was shocked, he called her. Yuseniel couldn't stand it any longer and asked why she had to go through such pain again because of him. He said that he was very sorry, but she screamed furiously and asked him not to come near her. She screamed that she believed him and believed everything he said, but now she did not know if it was true that he loved her. However, she screamed that their relationship had always been just an illusion, which changed depending on his mood. She threw his heart at his feet and screamed that they knew perfectly well that he did not love her. She said he was just so intoxicated with his own emotions that he walked all over her like it was nothing. She turned around and said she didn't want him to talk to her anymore. For some time, the emperor stared after her, unable to say anything. At the same time, the maids looked at the sky in surprise. They did not understand why suddenly gray clouds appeared in the clear sky, and unexpectedly for everyone, the sky became gloomy. Worthing hurriedly asked his friend if she was okay. He wanted to know what had happened, but she said with a smile that nothing serious had happened and he didn't need to worry. But a moment later, a terrible roar rang out in the hall. Everyone present was shocked. They did not understand what was happening at all. But a moment later, the people noticed a terrible crack in the ceiling. Less than a few minutes later, a chandelier fell into the middle of the hall. Everyone began to leave the beautiful hall in a hurry. At the same time, the madam screamed and called for her daughter. Yuseniel quickly ran to her mother, and her mother asked if everything was okay. She assured her mother that everything was fine, and at the same time, Madame said that they needed to leave quickly. Yuseniel ran to the carriage, but her sister stopped her. The young lady presented her sister with a beautiful stone with a smile and stated that she had found it on the floor in the hallway. She told her sister that it seemed to be something important to her, and at the same time, she was glad that her sister had not lost it. After some time, the aristocrats whispered among themselves, and as they understood that the situation was very bad, since there had been an earthquake and extreme weather events for several days in a row, but at the same time, they did not understand why the emperor did not give any orders. Meanwhile, the butler hurried to the emperor. Knocking on the door, he told the emperor that he would like to talk to him. Coming into the room, the man was taken aback, as he saw a very eerie picture. The butler asked the emperor to pull himself together. He wanted the emperor to save their empire. Evening, he was sure that without the emperor, their empire would fall apart. But the emperor only coldly told his subordinate to leave immediately. The man tried to calm the emperor down, but he only became furious. The man shuddered as he realized that all his persuasion had been in vain. A moment later, the emperor was left alone with his thoughts. He was puzzled as his beloved looked at him, and disgust was visible in her eyes. He could not get the image of her soul out of his head. The reason he breathed and the reason he still woke up every morning was because he met her. He knew she was the reason he lived. But at that very moment, the devil came to him. He said with a grin that the young man was simply ridiculous. He told the emperor to accept him completely, and then he would not only be able to return his love, then he can make sure that she is always by his side. Sometime later, the emperor summoned the married couple who had received the letter to an audience, and they did not return it, but divulged the contents. They trembled and begged him for mercy, just this once, because they had committed an unheard-of stupidity. He said angrily that they would pay for their crime with their lives. At that moment, he looked at them sadly and told his subordinates to execute them immediately. After some time, he looked closely at the imperial guard and ordered them to find and kill all those who had insulted the family of his beloved. He wanted them to make sure that none of them would get away with it. The duke was shocked and shouted to the emperor that he could not do this, as his order was too impulsive. He shouted that people could die by mistake, so he wanted the emperor to reconsider his decision. But at that very moment, he was taken aback. As the emperor put the sword to his throat, he said with fury that anyone who disobeyed him would die, and he had no intention of making an exception for anyone. After some time, the man said that their security on the border had significantly weakened due to extreme weather conditions, and the demons, taking advantage of this, invaded their territory and attacked civilians. He said that if they couldn't restore the defensive line, the situation would only get worse for them, and they needed to do something immediately. At that very moment, the emperor declared that they needed to destroy all the temples of light within the empire, as he was sure that God Lux was useless to them in the northern empire. At that very moment, everyone present changed their minds, because they did not understand what the emperor meant. They did not understand what relation the Temple of Light had to any demons. The emperor said that because of the evil spirits they worshipped, the empire was plunged into chaos, and demons were running wild. He wanted them to remove God's name and all symbols and all his remnants on earth. He said that this would solve all their problems. Meanwhile, the young lady was looking out the window, as she saw that the sky had remained like this for several weeks. It seemed to her as if a curse had been placed on the entire empire. At that very moment, she saw that her lover's heart had turned black. The beautiful treasure that once shone bright red became more and more dull and was now completely black. She was puzzled and did not know what was happening to her lover. But at that very moment, she cast all her thoughts aside more simply, as she was informed that a guest had arrived. When she came out, she looked at the man in surprise, as she did not expect to see him at all. Yusinil asked the man what brought him to her. She wanted him to pass by and they could talk calmly. But at that very moment, he declared that she must stop the emperor. He sighed heavily and said that the emperor had simply gone mad. He was not himself and seemed to have lost his mind. The man said that the emperor was now hurting everyone in the palace. He sighed and stated that many servants had suffered and the situation was very serious, so he prayed for help. Genyel couldn't resist asking the man why he asked her sister for help. She didn't want anyone to drag her sister into something dangerous. At that moment, the Duchess declared that her daughter was right, and it had nothing to do with them, so she asked the man to leave. Yusinil said without hesitation that she would go, because she knew that only she could handle this task, and her family was shocked. She looked at her family with a smile and declared that she was quite strong. She asked them not to worry and stated that she would return to them safe and sound. After some time, they rushed to the imperial palace. For a moment, the man saw his friend who was wounded. The man sighed heavily and declared that he had failed to stop the emperor. Yusinil asked where the emperor was now. She was told that he had not left the palace. Without wasting a minute, she ran to the palace. Turning around, she shouted that she would go around and look for the emperor, and that they should take care of the wounded. At the same time, the emperor was in prison. He was puzzled by everything that was happening and did not understand what he had done. He clearly remembered all the pain he had caused to innocent people, but in turn, he wondered what was happening to him at all. At that very moment, he was taken aback, as he heard a familiar voice. Yusinil, in turn, went down in a hurry, since she knew where her disillusioned one was. She shouted and called him again, But at that very moment, she asked if it was really him in front of her. But in turn, she froze when she saw his current appearance. He realized that all the time he was looking at greedy souls, but the most soulless and greedy soul was his own. At that very moment, he came to his senses as he heard the voice of his beloved. A moment later, he screamed horribly as the demon inside him pressed down on him. At that very hour, a terrible roar thundered in the palace, and an earthquake began. The young lady shouted after him, but he did not listen. He quickly ran into the dungeon while she ran after him. Yusanil, I made my way through the falling rocks. He was puzzled and simply could not let her see him like this. He understood that she would hate him even more. A moment later, she entered the dungeon and asked where he was. She wanted to know if he was wounded. But he screamed at her to stay away from him. Bursting into bitter tears, he screamed at her not to come near him because he didn't want her to see his ugly side. But the young lady had no intention of giving up. She immediately came closer to him and hugged him tightly, asking for forgiveness. She said that she really wanted to apologize to him because she was very sorry. Yusanil said that all her previous words were too harsh, and she was truly sorry. She knew that he had plucked up the courage to apologize to her, but she had not accepted him, but only hurt him. So she understood that he was in great pain. Tesfalun. He asked his beloved if she didn't hate him for becoming a monster. She said that it didn't matter to her, but he was extremely shocked by her words. But at that very moment, she kissed him tenderly. She declared that she loved him very much, regardless of what he looked like. Yusanil said with a smile that it didn't matter to her whether he was human or not. She still loved him. Yusanil said that even if his hair and eyes were a different color, she would still love him. Tesfalun was shocked and immediately hugged her tightly. He hugged her tightly, crying and asking for forgiveness. But his inner devil told him that he shouldn't give in to empty words. He was told that he shouldn't trust her because she would simply deceive him and eventually leave him. The devil told him to kill her immediately. Yusanil was taken aback and told her companion that he had squeezed her too hard. At that very moment, the demon informed the young man that he must immediately convince him. The emperor could not stand it and pushed his beloved away. She looked at him in surprise, as she did not understand what had happened. At that very moment, he reached for his heart and tried to rip it out of his chest. She looked at him in surprise and asked what he had done anyway. He screamed that he had pulled the devil out of his chest. At that very moment, the emperor pointed to the heart and declared that before the devil escaped, he must get rid of it. Yusanil froze in place for a moment, but at that very moment, she said that she would do it for him, so he should stay put and not move. She slowly approached the first emperor. She reached for his blade, which was embedded in the body itself. At that very moment, she pulled out the blade. Without hesitation, she struck the blade into the heart. Moments later, she heard her lover's voice. She ran to him and asked if he was okay. He said that now that the devil was dead, he was back to normal. Without a moment's hesitation, he thanked her for saving him. She was shocked because she saw that he had lost consciousness, and so she screamed for him to wake up immediately. But it was all in vain. After some time, they finally got out of the dungeon, and walking along a long corridor, the young lady screamed and called for someone to help. Tesfalun sighed heavily and asked his beloved to stop. She asked in surprise what had happened. He sighed and stated that he was having difficulty breathing. She screamed with tears in her eyes that he had to hold on a little longer. She didn't want him to pass out in her arms. But a moment later, she heard a man's voice. And the man was saying that she should leave the emperor alone, since he was supposed to die. She was taken aback and turned around because she heard a familiar voice. The man bowed and thanked the young lady for stopping the devil's attempt to seize power. He said with a smile that if it weren't for her, this world would have been destroyed. But at that very moment, he declared that everything would not end as long as the devil's blood continued to flow in the emperor's veins. Without a second thought, Yusanil shielded the emperor with her body. He told her to get out of the way immediately, but she was categorically against it. He said that until the demon blood was completely eradicated, disasters would continue. He asked if she wanted to put up with everything that was happening. Yusanil screamed that she would put an end to this because she would always be by his side. She said that even if new disasters happened, she would stand up and protect him no matter what happened. Looking at the man, she said that everything would be fine and he didn't need to worry. He sighed and stated that, in that case, there was nothing he could do to help her. A moment later, he turned around, intending to leave them. At that very moment, the young lady screamed and said that he must help her. She wanted to know how to save her beloved. She screamed and begged for help from the snow dragon. He sighed and declared that she should fill the void in him with what she had. At that very moment, she froze in place. She gazed intently at her lover for some time. She burst into bitter tears because she saw that he was not breathing. Yusinil, in turn, understood perfectly well that she could not lose him. She knew that she would do anything because she wanted to save him. At that very moment, she placed his own heart into his chest, and a moment later, he came to his senses. Yusinil, with tears in her eyes, asked her lover if he was okay. He sighed and said that he could hear her voice. She cried because she couldn't believe that it was finally all over. He hugged her tightly and thanked her for saving him. The next day, she asked him with a smile if she was sure she was okay. She wanted him not to overwork himself, but he said he had had enough rest. Tesfalin said with a satisfied smile that thanks to her, he began to sleep much better. He came closer to her and kissed her tenderly, but at the same moment, he declared that if she was ready, then they could go. She smiled and said that she was ready. After some time, they slowly walked towards all the guests. Everyone present was taken aback as they saw the young lady next to the emperor. He looked at everyone present and declared that he was addressing them as emperor to formally announce his empress. Tesfalin declared that his beloved Yusinil would become their new empress. Everyone present was surprised by his statement. While he said that the young lady was from a noble family, kind and noble, but most importantly, he truly loved her. Yusinil, looking at everyone, introduced herself and declared that she would be by the emperor's side and would do everything possible for the prosperity of the empire. And she also promised that, as their empress, she would devote herself to them with all her body and soul. At that very moment, a man from the crowd shouted and greeted the empress, and a moment later, the rest of the aristocrats joined his jubilation. The lady sighed heavily as she realized how it all ended. Her husband tried to calm her down, as he saw that the young people were full of determination. She was puzzled and wondered if this was intended from the beginning. After all, when her daughter was born, the fairy queen gave her prophecy. When she was born, she was said to have the power to suppress darkness and to be able to end chaos. However, she should have known that the closer she got to the subject, the more her life would be in danger. The fairy queen said that for this reason, she must not turn away from the light, and she must not stray from the path. Madame knew that the emperor could put her life in danger. After all, there was darkness lurking in his soul, but in the end, it couldn't change anything. She knew that if this was the path her daughter wanted to take, she couldn't turn her down the other road. She prayed silently, hoping that her choice would protect her. A little later, a grand wedding took place. Everyone was delighted, because they saw that their empress was simply beautiful. They said that she looked like a goddess from heaven. Lily, in turn, sheepishly said that her young lady really did look like a goddess, but her brother quietly said that she should be more quiet. Ruby looked at her friend shyly as she looked elegant. The emperor looked at the young lady with a satisfied smile and declared that he was giving her his heart because it had beaten only for her, and that his heart would always remain with her. She looked at him with a smile and declared that he was her emperor and he was her whole world. A moment later, the emperor tenderly kissed his wife. Everyone present looked at them intently because they could not believe that their precious Yusinil had gotten married so quickly. The professor looked at the young lady with a gentle smile. He was happy for her and wished her happiness. A few minutes later, the empress threw a bouquet into the crowd and announced that the next person to catch it would get married. To everyone's surprise, the bouquet was caught by young people. Edel asked his companion with embarrassment if she really wanted to catch the bouquet. The marquise was embarrassed by such a question. She shouted that it just flew in her direction by chance. Meanwhile, the emperor and empress were giggling contentedly as they looked at their friends. After some time, the young people left the noisy crowd and went to the tree. The empress said with a smile that when they were little, they often sat under it. At that very moment, the emperor froze in place and remembered how it was under this very tree that he proposed to her. At that very moment, he began to tremble and declared that he was very happy and simple. He could not believe such a thing. Yusinil came closer to her husband and declared with a smile that she loved him. He looked at her tenderly and declared that he also loved her. At that very moment, he tenderly kissed his lawful wife.